Chapter 1583. Holding your hand, I'll accompany you for 8,000 lives. Are you crying? Because I'm too excited. Why are you so excited? Because I finally brought you back and saw you. Why are you so excited to see me? Because I love you. Amidst the flowers, Yuan gently hugged Mu Chenxue. The two of them asked and answered, as if the two closest lovers were whispering to each other. However, the words that were spoken caused Feng Xiao and the others, who were watching from outside the courtyard, to feel a lump in their throat as tears flowed down their cheeks. I remember your name. I know the name Zhuowen, but I can't remember what Zhuowen looks like. What's wrong with me? Mu Chenxue slowly separated from Zhuowen. She stared at the young man in front of her and discovered that the young man in front of her was crying, as if he was crying like a helpless child. Even in the midst of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, in the midst of endless slaughter, there would still not be much emotion in his eyes. But now they were filled with tears. At this moment, Zhuowen was no longer the cold martial artist who constantly climbed to the peak and treated human life like dirt. Instead, he was a heartbroken person who was constantly crying because his lover had forgotten him. Don't cry, tell me a story. I remember that there's a guy called Zhuowen. He used to tell me a story. Do you know how to tell a story? Mu Chenxue gently wiped away the tears on Zhuowen's cheeks and giggled. Zhuowen immediately turned his tears into laughter. With his arms around Mu Chenxue, he slowly sat in the middle of the flowers and said softly, Shanghai Pass's commander Wu Sangui was furious because Chen Yuanyuan was taken away by Lu Zongmin. He refused to surrender to Li Zicheng and led the Qing troops into the pass. Yuan began to tell the story of Wu Sangui and Li Zicheng. From the beginning to the end, Yuan spoke very carefully and seriously. His expression was very focused and his voice was very soft. Mu Chenxue gently leaned on Zhuowen's chest and quietly listened to Zhuowen's narration. This scene made the people outside the courtyard sigh softly. Without a doubt, this was definitely a pair of ill-fated mandarin ducks. Moyan Wushang, who was sitting cross-legged at the edge of the flowers, slowly put away his zither. His beautiful eyes looked at the two quiet people in the flowers, sighed softly, and left the courtyard. Then, Wushang taught me a song. I like it. I Wushang. I'll sing it for you. Do you want to hear it? Mu Chenxue looked at Zhuowen. Wushang. Zhuowen kissed Mu Chenxue's forehead and smiled. All right, let me hear it. He. Mu Chenxue giggled. Unknowingly, she had taken out a zither from her spirit ring. When did you learn how to play the zither? Zhuowen couldn't help but laugh. Mu Chenxue gently stroked the zither and faintly said, Maybe I really don't remember you. But I know you. Ever since I woke up from my coma, Wushang has been telling me your story and the story between us. I listened to Wushang's story and listened to Wushang's music. I could feel your feelings. I thought that I should do something for you. So I learned the zither from Wushang and practiced my favorite song. Because I only want to play this song for you. I only hope that every time I play this song, there will still be a place in my heart that belongs to you. There will still be a memory that belongs to you. At this point, Mu Chenxue smiled. Her smile was very bright. After that smile, she gently plucked the zither strings. Her slender fingers were like flowing water as they streaked across the zither strings. Who holds my hand and restrains my madness for half my life? Who kisses my eyes and covers my wandering for half my life? Who caresses my face and comforts my sorrow for half my life? Who holds my heart and melts the frost for half my life? Who holds my shoulder and drives me to silence for the rest of my life? Who calls my heart and covers my desolation for the rest of my life? Who abandons me and leaves me alone for the rest of my life? Who can understand my intentions and make me have no regrets in this life? Who can help me move unhindered for 10,000 years? Who can pour my heart into my heart? Who can bury my sorrow and laugh at the vanity of the world? Cover my lips and dispel my wandering for the rest of my life. Hold my arms and dispel my frivolity for the rest of my life. Hold your hand and accompany you in your madness for 1,000 years. Kiss your eyes and accompany you for 10,000 reincarnations. The melody was leisurely, like the flowing water of high mountains, the empty springs of deep valleys, the mountain streams, and the bright moon hanging high in the sky. Accompanied by the beautiful melody, Mu Qinshue's clear and melodious voice, like an aureole, was slowly released. Her voice rose and fell, and it was soul-stirring. The echoes of the empty valley were endless. Hold your hand and accompany you in your madness for 1,000 years. Kiss your eyes and accompany you for 10,000 reincarnations. Zhuan murmured in a low voice. Looking at the woman who was focused on playing the zither, Zhuowen's smile became deeper and deeper. However, the sorrow in his eyes became deeper and deeper. When the song slowly fell, Zhuan walked behind Mu Qinshu and slowly hugged her. With a soft snoring sound, Zhuan realized that the beauty in front of him had already fallen into a deep sleep. Zhuan gently hugged the beauty and entered the room. He gently placed her on the bed and covered her with a blanket, silently watching the beauty's appearance. "Chen Shui, I will definitely cure you. You can be assured, I swear," Zhuowen softly muttered. Soon after, he kissed her smooth and spotlessly white forehead before resolutely leaving the house. Only, what Zhuowen did not see was that after he turned and left, the beauty lying on the bed slightly moved her eyelids. Walking out of the yard, Zhuowen looked at Feng Xiao and said, "Mother, where is Qin Shui's memory bead?" Feng Xiao carefully took out a bead from her chest and handed it to Zhuowen as she said, "Qin Shui's memory bead has been shattered too much. Although I have tried my best to slow it down, it is of no use." Zhuowen carefully took the memory bead. At this moment, the surface of the memory bead was covered in cracks, as if it could shatter at any moment. When the memory bead completely shatters, it will affect Qin Shui's soul. At that time, Qin Shui's soul will begin to collapse and there won't be much time left for Qin Shui. Feng Xiao said with a sigh. "Then what should I do?" Zhuowen slowly clenched his fists as he looked at Feng Xiao in a sad voice. "There are only two ways. One is to find a way to stop Qin Shui's soul from collapsing, and the other is to find a saint master to solve Qin Shui's current situation." Feng Xiao said this and gave a soft sigh. Without a doubt, these two methods were very difficult. Once it was something that touched the soul, it would be very hard to obtain or even rare. It would be hard to find something like this in the 4 large regions. As for a Saint Master level Arcana Master, there was no need to think about it in the 4 large regions. It was impossible for them to exist. Moreover, this memory bead won't last for long. At most in 2 months, this memory bead will completely shatter. Feng Xiao said with a sigh. Only 2 months? Zhuowen slightly knit his brows. 2 months was just too short for him. Even if he went to the Central Earth, it would take more than 2 months. Moreover, he might not even be able to find a Saint Master in the Central Earth. 2 months is too short. Is there no other way to slow it down? Zhuowen said in an urgent voice. There is another way. I remember that the Snow Palace has a profound crystal ice soul that has the ability to freeze souls. If you can obtain this profound crystal ice soul, you can use this profound crystal ice soul to freeze Qin Shui's soul. Perhaps this method can help Qin Shui completely suppress her collapsing soul. Feng Xiao said in a deep voice. Snow Palace? Profound crystal ice soul? Hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes lit up. If the profound crystal ice soul was useful, it could really slow down Qin Shui's collapsing soul. Let's go to the Snow Palace. Zhuowen took a deep breath. After discussing with Feng Xiao and the others, he waved his sleeve and left the Azure Dragon Palace. With the divine wings of wind and thunder and the laws of the void, if I fly day and night, I should be able to cross the eastern earth and enter the North Pole in a month. Standing on the endless yellow sand, Zhuowen looked to the north and muttered in a low voice. Kid, are you seeking death? Flying day and night, even if it's you can't handle it, right? Kid, do you want to die? You can use your flying mount. Xiao He appeared and warned him. Although the flying mount I have is not bad, it can't compare to my divine wings of wind and thunder and the laws of the void. I need to reach the North Pole as soon as possible. Zhuowen shook his head. A pair of 10-foot-long purple thunder wings suddenly appeared on his back. At the same time, the laws of the void were attached to his thunder wings. Tonglong. Thunder rumbled as Zhuowen entered the void. Like a bolt of lightning, he moved through the void tunnel at an extremely fast speed. This kid is crazy. In his knowledge sea, Xiao He helplessly looked at the youth moving through the void tunnel. I say, Xiao He, keep an eye on this kid Zhuowen. The void tunnel is not a good place. This kid wants to move forward continuously, so you have to keep an eye on him. Cheng Huang leisurely laid on the back of the divine turtle and calmly said, Demule Fox, you sit with your legs crossed all day doing nothing. What right do you have to order this dragon master around? What kind of dog are you? Seeing Cheng Huang like this, Xiao He immediately said in a bad mood, Hey, please don't confuse me with a dog. That dog is your brother. Don't you think it's an insult to me by calling me your brother? Cheng Huang shook its tail slightly and said with some disdain, Brr, scoundrel old fox, this old master will definitely bite you to death and pluck out all the hair on your body. Chapter 1584. A ghastly sight. White snow fluttered in the sky. This region was enveloped by ice and snow all year round. It was cold and lonely. This was the North Pole of the four regions. A crack appeared in the space at the peak of a snowy mountain that pierced through the clouds. A figure slowly descended on the peak of the snowy mountain. After a month, I finally reached the North Pole. As soon as this figure landed on the peak of the snowy mountain, his footsteps staggered, and he actually directly fell to the ground, panting. The pair of lightning wings on his back was extremely dim, like a candle in the wind that would be extinguished at any time. Xiao He hovered in front of the figure. Her small eyes stared at the latter with a complicated expression. She sighed, You really are desperate. You've been traveling day and night for a month. You're really lucky to be able to persevere. If it weren't for the support of immortal pills, you would have died of exhaustion long ago. Continuously using the 6 wings of wind and lightning and the laws of the void without any rest was an overload for any cultivator. It was very difficult to endure. However, Yun had managed to endure for a month. Of course, during this period, Yun had consumed quite a few immortal pills to barely endure. Otherwise, it was very likely that Zhuowen would have suddenly died on the way. There's still a month. I think you should rest well for a day or two before setting off. Xiao He felt her heart ache when she saw Zhuowen's appearance. At this moment, Yun could also sense that he had reached his limit. If he continued traveling in this state, he really would not be able to endure it. It just so happens that I'm resting for 2 days. I'll send someone to find out the location of the Snow Palace. Zhuowen had a tired expression. He brought Xiao He back to the Azure Dragon Hall. Zhu, you don't look too good. Are you all right? Zhuowen encountered Lu Hantian's group after entering the Azure Dragon Hall. Lu Hantian asked in concern. Zhuowen waved his hand and said, I'm fine. Where is Chen Shui? Zhuowen, come with me. Chen Shui has been talking about you during this time, and in order to not let her forget you, I've already brought her out of the 2nd layer of the world. I've built a pavilion in the Azure Dragon Square, that way she won't be affected by the flow of time in the 2nd layer of the world. Feng Xiao came in front of Zhuowen, pulled Zhuowen, and took him to a pavilion in the southeast corner of the Azure Dragon Square. After a month, there are even more cracks on the surface of the memory bead, and Chen Shui forgets things even faster. Even if I try to talk to her about things she's familiar with, she completely forgets them not long after. Feng Xiao took out the memory bead. At this moment, there was almost no intact part on the surface of the memory bead. The cracks were densely packed, and it looked extremely horrifying. Chen Shui forgot everything? Looking at the memory bead, Zhuowen revealed a look of sadness. No, she didn't forget the name Zhuowen. She still remembers it very clearly. She knows that Zhuowen is very important to her. She didn't forget the song she played for you a month ago. She knows that this song was played for you alone. Speaking of this, Feng Xiao was moved as she continued. Although her memories will gradually disappear with the memory bead, in her heart, there will always be a place for you, the most important place. Zhuowen felt his head explode. His nose was a little sour and his eyes were a little dry. The softest place in the deepest part of his heart seemed to have been touched. I'll go in and see her. Oh, that's right, Mother. Now that I've come to the North Pole, You can arrange for your subordinates to search for the location of the snow palace. After Zhuan finished speaking, he stepped into the courtyard. This pavilion was very quiet. In this secluded atmosphere, there was a faint elegance to it. It was like a lotus flower in a lotus pond, blooming its most beautiful petals. No one was there to see it, but it still proudly bloomed. In the courtyard, there were fake mountains, small bridges, flowing water, birds singing, green grass, and hundreds of flowers in full bloom. In the middle of the fake mountains, small bridges, flowers, and green grass, there was a white jade pavilion. In the center of the pavilion, there was a white jade table and a stone bench. An extraordinary figure was quietly sitting on the stone bench. Her jade-like hands were placed on the table and there was an ancient zither placed on top of it. This figure seemed to be thinking with her head lowered, as if she was recalling something. Perhaps it was because she couldn't remember anything, but her brows slightly knit together and her nose wrinkled a little. Light footsteps attracted the figure's attention. She slightly raised her head and stared at Zhuan walking over. Her beautiful eyes revealed a look of doubt as she asked, "You? Or you? Zhuan's figure stiffened, but his expression was calm. He came to the pavilion and sat in front of Mu Chenxue. He smiled and said, "My name is Zhun. Do you still remember me?" "I seem to know the name Zhun." Mu Chenxue suddenly sat up straight. She pulled up her sleeves and stretched out her flawless white arm. There were 2 lines of words engraved on her arm. These words were incomparably bright red, as if they were carved on her skin with some kind of sharp weapon. Zhuan's expression changed slightly. He grabbed Mu Chenxue's arm and stared at the 2 lines of words on her arm. The contents of these 2 lines of words were very simple, but Zhuan felt as if his eyes were about to split open. The softest part in the deepest part of his heart felt as if it had been ruthlessly stirred. Zhuan could no longer control his extremely sour nose. Tears began to flow down uncontrollably like a heavy downpour. They streaked across Zhuan's cheeks and hung on his chin like a waterfall. It looked extremely sad and beautiful. Zhuan is the most important person. Don't forget. When I see Zhuan, I must play the song that I'm best at for him. It's also the only song that I know. The contents of these 2 lines of words were very simple. There was no unforgettable oath, no promise that would last until the end of time, and no grand words that would last forever. There were only 2 lines of very simple words. She didn't want to forget an important person and wanted to play the only song that she knew for the important person. These 2 lines, how could Zhuan not imagine the scene of Mu Chenxue carving these 2 lines of words? Perhaps it was because she was afraid that she would forget, so because of the anxiety in her heart, she slowly carved these 2 lines of words on her flawless arm. By carving these 2 lines of words, she had achieved her goal. She knew that even if she would forget many things, as long as the 2 lines of words on her arm did not disappear, she would never forget the name Zhuan. She would always leave the most important position in her heart for this man named Zhuan. "Chenxue, why are you doing this? Why are you not afraid of hurting yourself to remember the name Zhuan?" Zhuan gently stroked the 2 lines of words on Mu Chenxue's arm. The blood had already turned a bit dark red because of the passage of time. Seeing these 2 lines of shocking words, Zhuan felt an unbearable pain in his heart. "Actually, every morning when I wake up, I will notice these 2 lines of words in my hand. I know that I have always been waiting for a man named Zhuan. He is a very important person to me, a person that I do not want to forget. Although I am normally very forgetful, I do not want to forget this name. I know that if I really choose to forget this name, I will regret it and I will be annoyed, as if I have lost everything." After saying this, Mu Chenxue's eyes revealed a trace of sadness. She stared at Zhuan and said, "You are Zhuan, right? You are the Zhuan that I have always been waiting for, right? I have already been sitting in the courtyard waiting for 20 days. Every day when people came in, I would ask them if they were Zhuan, but they would all say no. I know that the person I have been waiting for has not appeared yet, so I have always been thinking about why the person I have been waiting for has not appeared in front of me after all this time." Zhuan gently took Mu Chenxue into his embrace and said with a bit of guilt, "Chenxue, I'm sorry. I have neglected you during this time. I was too selfish not being by your side." It's fine. Auntie Xiao said it before. The reason why you weren't by my side before was because you were trying to find a way to cure me. You wanted to cure my amnesia. Mu Chenxue gently hugged Zhuowen, and this was the first time her eyes revealed a trace of sadness. She said in a soft voice, I know that I don't have much time left, so can you stay with me during this final period of time? I don't want to forget you. Zhuowen's heart was finally moved. He tightly hugged Mu Chenxue and firmly said, Chenxue, nothing will happen to you. I will cure you. Whether it's cured or not, this is not the most important thing to me. I just want you to stay by my side and we can happily live together for a while, all right? I know that I am forgetful, but I will try my best to remember every action and every word you say. Can you stay with me? Mu Chenxue weakly leaned against Zhuowen's shoulder. Crystal-like tears flowed down her face like pearls and her voice was choked with emotions. Perhaps even Mu Chenxue did not know why she was this emotional and couldn't control herself. Chenxue, I'm sorry. I have spent too little time with you. I will stay with you from now on and will not be separated from you. Zhuowen hugged Mu Chenxue's waist and his lips curled into a bitter smile. That's right, he had always ignored Mu Chenxue's feelings. Perhaps Mu Chenxue had already realized her condition, but she was not sad about it. However, because he was not by her side, she was crying like a child. Zhuowen knew that he had made a fatal mistake. He knew that Mu Chenxue's request was very simple. As long as he stayed by her side and gave her the most beautiful memories, that was what she wanted the most. I will always be with you. Zhuowen gently stroked Mu Chenxue's back. His eyelids drooped and a deep weariness filled his heart, making his eyelids even heavier. Chapter 1585. Storming the Snow Palace. Zhuowen slept for 3 days and 3 nights. He had used the 6 wings of wind and lightning and the laws of the void nonstop for an entire month. Even if Zhuowen's body was made of steel, it would still be difficult for him to endure. During these 3 days, Mu Chenxue had been by Zhuowen's side the entire time. She had placed Zhuowen on her lap as she gently fiddled with his messy hair. Her gaze was gentle. Although her memories were deteriorating day by day, she knew that she had not forgotten the man before her. Not only did the man before her exist in her memories, he also existed in her heart. He had an unshakable position in her heart. Her memories might disappear, but she had always kept that position in her heart for him. If there really comes a day when I will completely forget about you, please believe that there will always be an important position in my heart reserved for you. That is the only position that belongs to you. No one can replace it. Mu Chenxue gently stroked Zhuowen's hair as a sweet smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. However, she grabbed Mu Chenxue's lily-white hand with one hand. Mu Chenxue was startled. Soon after, her beautiful eyes shifted downwards. At this moment, the man who should have been sleeping soundly before her had already opened his eyes. His clear eyes were filled with attachment, dominance, stubbornness, and tenacity. That important position in your heart is mine. Your memories can only be filled with my image. I will help you settle everything. I will also help you cure your illness. As long as you listen to me, I, Zhuowen, will help you no matter what. With that, Zhuowen suddenly flipped over and pulled Mu Chenxue into his embrace. Their eyes met. He stared at the woman before him for a very long time before he said domineeringly, You are my woman, so I am your mountain. I will support everything for you. All you need to do is lie in my embrace. I will take care of everything. After saying that, Zhuowen did not wait for Mu Chenxue to reply. He kissed her fiercely. This kiss was very domineering and also very attached. Days passed, and during this time, Zhuowen had sent out many Ryuka martial artists to scout the North Pole. They had also found out the exact location of the Snow Palace. On the other hand, Mu Chenxue's condition was getting worse by the day. Her memory was starting to become fragmented. She would immediately forget what she had just said. Although Zhuowen didn't say anything, Mu Chenxue could feel that something was wrong with her. Her eyes were getting dimmer and dimmer, and the light in her eyes was fading away. Zhuowen, I can feel that I only have half a month left. Maybe after half a month, my soul will collapse. You don't have to hide it from me. I can feel the state of my soul. Mu Qinshue's beautiful eyes stared at the man in front of her. At this moment, she realized that the man in front of her was getting further and further away from her. She didn't like this feeling, but it was very real. Hun kissed Mu Qinshue's forehead gently and said softly, "My woman, I've said it before. I am your mountain. I will support you. Don't you still have half a month? I have already found a way to stop your soul from collapsing. Are you leaving? Are you leaving? Are you abandoning me?" Mu Qinshui suddenly choked with sobs. Her jade-like hand grabbed Zhuo Wen's arm as she stared at him with her tear-stained eyes. At this moment, Jun could see the deep helplessness in Mu Qinshue's eyes. It was a sad loneliness, as well as a kind of fear of losing something important. At this moment, Jun could see many emotions in Mu Qinshue's eyes. His heart was filled with pain, and this pain spread throughout his body, making him want to roar out. But he didn't. He suppressed the emotions in his heart. He knew that Mu Qinshui didn't have much time left. The profound crystal ice soul that Feng Xiao mentioned, he had to obtain it as soon as possible. "Qinshui, I have to leave for a bit, but I swear I will be back soon." After Zhuon said this, he left the courtyard under Mu Qinshue's unwilling gaze. "We found the location of the Snow Palace. What should we do next?" Walking out of the Azure Dragon Square, Long Xiaolun, Lu Hantian, and the others all came forward to ask Zhuon. "I don't have much time, let's directly attack the Snow Palace." Zhuon said in a soft voice. "Attack the Snow Palace?" Everyone was stunned, but they didn't have any objections. The current Ryuka had already developed to a very strong degree. They had overturned the Blue Dragon Hall and the Burning Heaven sect. Although the Snow Palace was very strong, it was only on the same level as the Burning Heaven sect. Moreover, the Snow Palace's palace master, Yuan Jibai, was like a stray dog running away from Burning Heaven City. If Yuan Jibai didn't act smart this time, Zhuon wouldn't mind directly destroying the Snow Palace. The North Pole was covered in snow all year round, scattering in all directions like goose feathers. The Snow Palace was located in the Snow Mountain Range, which was the coldest and highest mountain range in the North Pole. This mountain range had countless branches, and on the branches, there were many other forces. They were densely packed and looked very magnificent. The main branch of the Snow Mountain Range was the location of the Snow Palace, and it was respected by the other forces of the Snow Mountain Range. At the foot of the Snow Mountain Range, a tall figure walked over step by step. He walked step by step towards the main branch of the Snow Mountain Range where the Snow Palace was located. His footsteps were very firm and determined. Who is this person? How dare he trespass into the Snow Mountain Range? Is he looking for death? Look at his clothes, he's definitely not from the Snow Palace. Moreover, he's heading towards the Snow Palace. Is he planning to break into the Snow Palace? This figure, who was climbing up the Snow Mountain Range, quickly attracted the attention of countless forces of the surrounding branches. Why are you trespassing into the Snow Mountain Range? A loud shout was heard, and a muscular man wearing an ice crystal armor blocked the path ahead with a dozen or so subordinates with terrifying auras. It's the Snow Armor Palace. The Snow Armor Palace is the most powerful of the four forces of the Snow Palace. Now that this unknown person is walking towards the Snow Palace, the Snow Armor Palace is planning to take action. The Snow Armor Palace's palace master, Shui Hong, is also here. His strength has reached the peak of the profound Saint Realm. His strength is not to be underestimated. Many factions from the surrounding branch factions were paying attention to this side. There were even many factions who cast pitiful gazes at the lone figure. The Snow Armor Palace was the most powerful of the four forces of the Snow Palace. If the Snow Palace did not take action, the Snow Armor Palace could dominate the entire Snow Mountain Range. Brother Shui Hong, you're quite fast, aren't you? This person is just one person. There's no need for Brother Shui Hong to take action, right? A somewhat feminine voice was heard, and a white-clothed man with an extremely slender waist, like a water snake, landed not far from the people of the Snow Armor Palace with several people. Although this person was a man, his words and actions were like a woman's. They were pretentious and made people feel nauseous. It's the palace master of the soft snow palace, In Ro Shui. Let's all hide. Don't let him take a fancy to us. Seeing the pretentious man, many of the warriors of the surrounding branches hid far away as if they were avoiding the plague. They did not dare to get close to Yin Ro Shui. It was not that Yin Ro Shui's strength was terrifying and made people avoid her. Instead, Yin Ro Shui had a strange habit that made people feel extremely disgusted. Yin Ro Shui liked men and would often dress herself up beautifully. She was a typical sissy. The corner of Shui Hong's eyes twitched. He also kept a certain distance from Yin Ro Shui. He could not stand Yin Ro Shui's sissy behavior. Or you don't seem to be a disciple of any of the branches of the Snow Mountain Range. If you don't want to get hurt, hurry up and get lost, Shui Hong said as he coldly stared at the young man in front of him. "Oh, Shui Hong, why are you so fierce? You scared me so much that my heart almost jumped out of my chest." Yin Ro Shui snorted and stomped his foot. That pretentious posture made Shui Hong's face turn incomparably ashen. "This little brother looks quite handsome. I wonder what's your name? Why don't you come to Soft Snow Hall as a guest?" "I will properly entertain you," Yin Ro Shui said as he looked at the young man in front of him with a grin. Seeing Yin Ro Shui's coquettish smile, Zhuowen's face turned slightly green. This Yin Ro Shui was really a sissy. The sissy Zhuowen could not help but want to beat him up. "You better not block my path. Those who block me will die. If you don't want to die, then get lost." Zhuowen coldly spat out these words. Immediately after, he continued to walk towards the main branch as if nothing had happened. He did not put Shui Hong and Yin Ro Shui in his eyes at all. As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings immediately fell into silence. Everyone stared blankly at the young man who continued to walk forward. Many people were unable to wrap their heads around it. This kid was a little too arrogant. He actually told Shui Hong and Yin Ro Shui to get lost or die. This little brother really has a personality. I like it. Yin Ro Shui laughed loudly. However, within his long and narrow eyes, a terrifying light that could take one's soul burst forth. This was a sign of his anger. On the other hand, Shui Hong was much more direct. He directly expressed his anger on his face. His face was almost distorted and ferocious. His breathing was heavy, just like a ferocious beast. "You are really courting death. Take this kid down. I want to see what qualifications he has to speak so arrogantly." Under Shui Hong's command, the dozen or so subordinates behind him turned into a dozen or so figures and instantly rushed toward Zhuowen. However, these dozen or so figures did not get close to Zhuowen. They were blocked by golden sword rays. The countless sword rays were extremely fast. They turned into countless sword shadows in front of their eyes. In an instant, the dozen or so figures that rushed toward Zhuowen were cut into countless pieces by the countless sword rays. They were killed in one strike. I've said it before. Those who block my path will die. After killing the dozen or so figures in a clean manner, Zhuowen's gaze landed on Shui Hong. With a thought, the killer four sacred sword array swept out like a gust of wind, instantly enveloping Shui Hong. "Break for me!" Shui Hong roared out furiously and summoned his saint artifact. However, the moment he summoned his saint artifact, before he could even unleash the power of the saint artifact, a large hand shot over and snatched the saint artifact from his hand. Chapter 1586. Mysterious Crystal Ice Soul, what a fast speed! I didn't even see his figure, and Shui Hong was already defeated? Who is this person? He defeated Shui Hong in one move. Did he really come to the Ice Mountain Range to cause trouble? When Shui Hong's Saint Tool was taken away and blasted to the ground, many forces in the surrounding Ice Mountain Range had yet to react. When they finally reacted, it set off an uproar. Shui Hong was the palace master of the Snow Armor Hall, a peak profound sage. Apart from the Ice Palace, he was the strongest force in the Ice Mountain Range. Now, Shui Hong was so weak in front of this young man. Just who was this young man, and how could he be so strong? "I heard that you want me to go to your Soft Snow Hall as a guest. Is that true?" Zhuowen unceremoniously put Shui Hong's Saint Tool into his bag, then glanced at Yin Ro Shui on the other side and grinned. Looking at the grinning face of this young man, Yin Ro Shui's whole body trembled, and fear rose in her heart. Ha! Little brother, you must be joking. Our soft snow hall is too small. Little brother shouldn't be interested in us. In Roshue squeezed out a rather ugly smile. In that case, get out of my way. Don't block my way. Jun lightly spat out these words. In Roshue's whole body stiffened, and she could only nod and bow and move out of the way, smiling from time to time. It could be said that she had lost all face as the palace master of the soft snow hall. After In Roshue moved out of the way, Yun walked towards the main mountain range unhurriedly. At the peak of the main mountain range was a huge building complex. That was the Ice Palace. Shui Hong struggled to get up. Looking at the departing figure, his face turned green and white. Shui Hong, you've really suffered a double loss. Not only have you been slapped in the face, even your saint artifact has been snatched away by him, In Ro said sarcastically as she landed near Shui Hong. Shui Hong's face was gloomy, and he coldly said, "It's much better than someone like you who has to compromise." Moreover, this person dared to ignore the Ice Mountain range. The Ice Palace won't let him go. In Roshue's face turned serious. She nodded slightly and said in a deep voice, "You are right. The Snow Palace is not like our 4 great palaces. This kid will suffer a little when the time comes. Let's go up and watch the show." Shui Hong and In Ro were not the only ones to follow suit. Many of the factions in the vicinity of the Ice Snow Mountain range followed behind Jun and headed towards the main branch's Ice Snow Palace. Their goal was surprisingly the same. They wanted to see how the Snow Palace would punish the arrogant young man before them. Jun slowly stepped onto the mountain gate of the main vein. As for the disciple who was guarding the gate, he was sent flying by Jun with a single palm strike. "Who are you? How dare you trespass into the Snow Palace?" When Jun sent the gatekeeping disciple flying with a single palm strike, all the disciples of the Snow Palace were alarmed. The disciples in the uniform of the Snow Palace all gathered at the entrance of the Snow Palace. They glared angrily at the young man who had barged in without any regard for the rules. "Tell your palace master, Yuan Jibai, to get the hell out here. I, Thun, have something to say to her." Jun did not pay any attention to the disciples who were glaring at him. Instead, he spoke calmly. As soon as he said that, the crowd was immediately enraged. There was even an uproar. "What an arrogant brat. Is our palace master's name something you can call her by? You actually dare to tell our palace master to get the hell out here? Who do you think you are? How dare you say something like that? You are simply courting death. This kid is far too arrogant. Let's go together and take him down." The disciples of the Snow Palace were all filled with righteous indignation. Especially when Zhuowen asked Yuan Jibai to come out, it made many of them want to kill Zhuowen. Although Yuan Jibai was the high and mighty palace master, she was also a beauty of ice. She possessed a unique charm that was extremely attractive to the male disciples of the Snow Palace. It could be said that Yuan Jibai was very popular in the Snow Palace. Many of the inner disciples were secretly in love with Yuan Jibai. To a large portion of the male disciples of the Snow Palace, Yuan Jibai was a goddess that could not be blasphemed. Now Yun was so unscrupulous as to tell Yuan Jibai to get the hell out here. This immediately triggered the anger of many of the male disciples. Bush. In an instant, hundreds of disciples of the Snow Palace rushed out and attacked Yun as if they had lost their minds. However, Zhuowen stretched out his right hand. Instantly, the 4-kill sacred sword formation that revolved around him shot out numerous extremely terrifying sword shadows. They were like a myriad of slithering snakes that covered the sky. The hundreds of disciples of the Snow Palace were instantly sliced into countless pieces. They couldn't be more dead. "Yuan Jibai, are you still not going to get the hell out here? Are you going to wait until I raise your entire Snow Palace to the ground before you are willing to come out?" Zhuowen did not care about the hundreds of disciples of the Snow Palace that had died in an instant. He continued to shout towards the depths of the Snow Palace. Of course, Zhuowen's arrogant words immediately caused many of the surrounding factions that had gathered to watch to mutter in their hearts. They all thought that Zhuowen was too impulsive and arrogant. However, such thoughts soon vanished into thin air. This was because a huge palace with countless dragon silhouettes appeared in the sky behind Zhuowen. It slowly appeared before everyone's eyes. The pressure that emanated from the hall seemed to have the power of 1,000 caddies. It pressed down on the martial artists, causing them to tremble. The martial artists who were below the level of sage could not withstand it and knelt on the ground. What is this great hall? Why does it have such a terrifying pressure? Many of the disciples of the Snow Palace retreated. Some of them even spat out a mouthful of blood because they could not bear it. Their faces paled and their legs trembled. Swish, swish, swish. The moment the Azure Dragon Palace appeared, figures shot out from the entrance one after another. To the despair of many of the Snow Palace's disciples, even the weakest of them was a half-saint. There were even some powerful saints among them. More than 100 experts descended upon the Snow Palace. The combined force of their forces was extremely powerful. What kind of organization is this? Why is it so terrifying? Shui Hong and Yin Roshue, who had originally come to watch Zhuan make a fool of himself, saw the terrifying palace and the many cultivators around it. They were all at least half-saints. The two of them could even sense several extremely dangerous presences from the group of cultivators. Clearly, there were existences that were even more powerful than the two of them. What kind of organization was this? Without a doubt, the organization before them had even surpassed the Snow Palace. Since when had such an organization risen in the Arctic? Shui Hong and Yin Roshue smiled bitterly at each other when they thought up to there. They discovered that their previous thoughts were just too laughable. With the strength of the young man before them, he did not even fear the Snow Palace, let alone them. It was no wonder why he dared to speak so recklessly before. It was not because the young man was reckless, but because he did have the ability to be arrogant. You don't want to come out? All right, then don't blame me, Yin, for starting a massacre in your Snow Palace today, Zhuan said extremely coldly. As soon as he finished speaking, a clear voice suddenly rang out from the depths of the Snow Palace. 5 figures shot out from the huge palace forged from ice and snow. The leader of the 5 figures was the ice-cold palace master of the Snow Palace, Yuan Zhibai. The 4 figures following behind Yuan Zhibai were 4 old women wearing similar snow-white robes. The 4 old women in snow-white robes all possessed vast presences. They were not weak saints. They should be elders of the Snow Palace. The palace master has come out. Seeing Yuan Zhibai step out of the Snow Palace, many of the Snow Palace's disciples outside let out a sigh of relief. Their hearts that were originally hanging in the air also completely relaxed. "And why have you come to our Snow Palace? Bathing Lake and many of our elites have died in the burning Heaven City. Don't tell me you still don't want to let our Snow Palace go?" Yuan Zhibai's pretty face was pale, but at the same time, it was filled with anger. She felt that Zhuan had gone too far. The Snow Palace's losses were already severe enough. Did this Zhuan come to the North Pole this time to add insult to injury? As soon as Yuan Zhibai's words came out, many of the surrounding branch forces began to discuss. Previously, when Yuan Zhibai went to the Burning Heaven sect to participate in the marriage alliance, the branch forces all knew about it. However, when Yuan Zhibai returned, she was alone. The rest of the people were nowhere to be seen. Because of this, many of the branch forces had discussed it. Now, from what Yuan Zhibai had said, other than Yuan Zhibai, the rest of the people might have died. Moreover, those who died might have had something to do with the young man in front of them. Thinking of this, many of the surrounding branch forces showed extreme fear towards the young man standing in front of the main hall. "I'm not here to settle accounts with you, but to ask for something from you," Zhuan said indifferently. Yuan Zhibai was slightly vigilant. "What is it?" "Mysterious crystal ice soul. Your Snow Palace should have this item," Zhuan said indifferently. "Mysterious crystal ice soul? Impossible. This is the foundation of my Snow Palace. We can't give it to you." Yuan Zhibai's face changed slightly as she quickly refused. Many of the surrounding branch forces also revealed a surprised expression. Regarding the mysterious crystal ice soul, they naturally knew about it. The mysterious crystal ice soul was the crystallization of the entire ice snow mountain range. It was related to the survival of the entire ice snow mountain range. It could be said that the ice snow mountain range had extremely rich yuan veins, and these yuan veins were supported by the mysterious crystal ice soul. The mysterious crystal ice soul could be said to be the heart of the ice snow mountain range. If the mysterious crystal ice soul was taken away, the yuan veins in the main and branch forces of the ice snow mountain range would be completely exhausted. Many forces established on top of the ice snow mountain range would also lose the most important yuan veins for their forces. Chapter 1587. Lowering his head, Palace Master, you can't hand over the mysterious crystal ice soul. If you do, the entire ice mountain range will be doomed. The mysterious crystal ice soul is the core lifeline of the entire ice mountain range. Once it's taken away, the foundation we've painstakingly built in the ice mountain range will be destroyed. Palace Master, please reconsider. In an instant, many of the surrounding subsidiary forces began to advise Yuan Zhibai. Although they all said that it was for the good of the Ice Palace, Yuan Zhibai knew that these subsidiary forces were only doing it for their own benefit. After all, the mysterious crystal ice soul was related to the entire ice mountain range. Once it was taken away, the impact on the subsidiary forces of the ice mountain range would be great. At that time, the foundation they had built in the subsidiary forces would indeed be destroyed. The Sex Foundation or the lives of all of you here. I think you should also make a choice, right? Zhuowen's voice was very calm. Then, he reached out with his right hand and took out the heaven-defying Saint Artifact level tile. However, the surface of the tile was no longer as dazzling as before. Instead, it seemed a little dim. Zhuowen knew that he had used this tile too many times. There was not much saint connotation left in it left by a heaven-defying saint. However, it was more than enough to deter the Ice Palace and many of the other forces here. Rumble. Saint force was injected into the tile. Golden light soared into the sky like a blazing sun, converging into a majestic figure that could seize the heavens and the earth. This majestic figure was indomitable, spanning across the void like a god. The terrifying pressure that radiated from his body was like countless mountains falling from the sky, crushing the surrounding people. Their expressions changed drastically, and their bodies trembled. This can't be a heaven-defying saint artifact, right? Yuan Zhibai's body trembled. Her frosty eyes finally revealed a look of disbelief. This was a heaven-defying saint artifact. With this heaven-defying saint artifact in hand, one alone could slaughter all of the living beings in the Ice Mountain range. If Yuan Zhibai had not left Burning Sky City and stayed behind to witness the battle between Zhuowen and the many experts of the Icefire clan, perhaps she would not be as shocked as she was now. Unfortunately, she had already left Burning Sky City before the arrival of the Ice and Fire clan, and had missed the great battle in Burning Sky City. After returning to the North Pole Snow Palace, Yuan Zhibai had inquired about the situation in Burning Sky City. However, the news she received was that the Burning Heaven City had been destroyed, and almost no one had survived. Yuan Zhibai had also mistakenly thought that the one who had massacred the Burning Heaven City was Zhuowen, which was why she was so afraid of Zhuowen. Now, Zhuowen had taken out a heaven-defying saint treasure. She knew that the Snow Palace, or even the entire Snow Mountain range, could not stop this young man. If they dared to resist, only death would await them. The subsidiary forces that had originally raised objections also fell silent. In the face of a heaven-defying saint treasure, even if they had more people, it was useless. Many cultivators didn't know how terrifying the saints of the heaven-defying sacred realm were, but they had seen the power of the Yangtian sacred realm. Just the Yangtian sacred realm was enough for them to look up to, let alone the heaven-defying sacred realm that was 2 levels higher than the Yangtian sacred realm. Sigh. I'll give you the black crystal ice soul. I only ask that you let our Snow Mountain range go. Yuan Zhibai's pretty face was filled with helplessness, and the beautiful eyes that stared at Zhuowen were extremely complicated. Wait a moment, I'll go in and get the black crystal ice soul for you. This may take some time. Yuan Zhibai looked at Zhuowen with an inquiring look. Don't worry, I'll wait here. You just have to hurry. Zhuowen said lightly. Yuan Zhibai didn't say much, and brought the 4 old women back into the Snow Palace. After about 4 hours, Yuan Zhibai came out of the Snow Palace again. At this moment, Yuan Jibai looked pale and tired. Take it, this is the black crystal ice soul. Yuan Jibai reluctantly handed a hexahedral crystal to Zhuan. The surface of the hexahedral crystal looked crystal clear, and it faintly revealed a light blue luster. Wisps of white mist lingered on the surface of the crystal, as if it was filled with cold air. The moment Zhuan came into contact with the crystal, he was intimidated by the cold air on the surface of the crystal. Fortunately, his physical body was extremely strong. With a slight shake, he shook off the cold air that was pressing towards him. As expected of the black crystal ice soul. Just as Mother said, the cold air inside really has the effect of freezing the soul. Holding the black crystal ice soul in his hand, Zhuowen's eyes shone with an unprecedented light. He, who was in contact with the black crystal ice soul, could clearly feel that the cold air emitted from the surface of the black crystal ice soul had penetrated deep into his bones, as if it wanted to freeze his soul. If it wasn't for Zhuan blocking it with his saint energy, the cold air could have really spread to the depths of his soul, freezing his entire soul. Let's go! Zhuan sent all the Ryuka people into the Azure Dragon Palace. With a wave of his sleeve, he sent the Azure Dragon Palace into his spirit ring. With a single step, he disappeared from the Ice Snow Mountain range. As soon as Zhuowen left, the surrounding atmosphere instantly became much more relaxed, but most people still had worried expressions on their faces. They knew very well that once the mysterious crystal ice soul was taken away, the entire Ice Snow Mountain range would no longer be suitable for cultivation. It was likely that the various forces established in the Ice Snow Mountain range would move out of the Ice Snow Mountain range in the following period of time. The Ice Snow Palace that occupied the main mountain range would bear the brunt of this. In the Azure Dragon Square, Zhuan excitedly placed the black crystal ice soul in front of Feng Xiao and said, "Mother, I have the black crystal ice soul. This thing should be able to stop Chen Shui's soul from collapsing, right?" Feng Xiao carefully took out a jade box and placed the black crystal ice soul inside. She said, when do you plan on freezing Chen Shui's soul? You have to know that once the soul is frozen, Chen Shui will fall into a deep slumber unless you can find a way to save her soul." Zhuowen's face froze and he fell into silence. He understood Feng Xiao's meaning. He knew that once Mu Chenshue's soul was frozen, Mu Chenshue would fall into a deep slumber. He would not be able to be like before, where the two of them would be like lovers, speaking softly to each other. "Mother, when can we delay using the black crystal ice soul?" Zhuan looked at Feng Xiao and asked in a sorrowful voice. Feng Xiao also looked at Zhuan. Her beautiful eyes focused as she said with a soft sigh, "Chen Shui still has around half a month. Once half a month passes, her memory bead will completely shatter and her soul will begin to collapse at that moment. That is the moment when the soul will freeze the most." "There's still half a month? Mother, let's use the black crystal ice soul in half a month," Zhuowen said in a deep voice. "In this half a month, accompany Chen Shui. She always wants to see the sunrise and sunset, as well as the stars in the night sky." Before Feng Xiao finished speaking, she was interrupted by a clear voice. "What I want more is to be with you. Zhuan, without you, what's the point of looking at it? I only want to look at it with you." Zhuan turned around and his eyes fell onto a phoenix-like graceful girl not far away. He quickly walked in front of Mu Chenshue and said with a bit of guilt, "Chen Shui, I'm back." "I know," Mu Chenshue said with a faint smile. "I'll bring you out, all right? I'll accompany you to see what you want to see, all right?" Wen held Mu Chenshue's jade-like hand and said with a smile, "And bring me out. You can accompany me, it doesn't matter where we go." Mu Chenshue's smile was very happy. Zhuowen and Mu Chenshue walked out of the Azure Dragon Palace. Zhuowen brought Mu Chenshue across mountains, rivers, forests, and valleys. He brought her through various terrains, seeing ancient ruins one by one, as well as watching the sunrise and sunset every day, as well as the stars in the night sky every night. Half a month slowly passed, and when the sun slowly rose on the 15th day, Yuan tightly hugged Mu Chenshue. "Chen Shui, let's get married. I want you to become my true wife, all right?" Zhuan hugged Mu Chenshue as he spoke with a smile. Mu Chenshue's beautiful eyes revealed a pleasantly surprised look, but she quickly revealed a sad look. She leaned against Zhuowen's chest and gently shook her head as she said, You know my situation. If we get married now, it will only drag you down. That won't happen. I've already prepared our wedding clothes. Zhuan firmly said. After that, Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao led a group of people to appear behind them. They saw two tall maids carrying two sets of wedding clothes as they walked in front of Zhuan and Mu Chenxue. Chen Shui, this is Zhuowen's kind intentions, you can't reject it. He has already prepared for this day for a long time. Feng Xiao took the wedding clothes and walked over to Mu Chenxue's side. She gently helped her put on the wedding clothes and then took a few steps back. She revealed a gratified smile and said, My daughter-in-law is the most beautiful. Xiaolun, don't you think so? Long Xiaotian laughed and scratched his head. He repeatedly said, That's natural. Xiao, you're as beautiful as you were in the past. Feng Xiao's face turned red and she rolled her eyes at Long Xiaotian. She muttered, You're not serious at all. Although she said this, Feng Xiao's face was filled with sweetness and the smile on her face was glowing. Uncle Aunt, you should know my situation. Do you agree to my marriage with Zhuan? Mu Chenxue's eyes turned red as she spoke. Why wouldn't I agree? My daughter-in-law is so beautiful and obedient. As her mother, how could I not agree? Feng Xiao revealed a faint smile and immediately pushed Zhuan away. She said, The groom should leave first. Before the bride gets married, she has to dress up properly. After that, Yun was pulled away by Long Xiaotian, Lu Hantian, and a group of close people. Even Zhuowen's grandfather, Zhuowen's first uncle, second uncle, and other family members were present. They all looked at Zhuowen with a smile. Chapter 1588. Get married. Zhuowen was dragged away like a moon surrounded by stars. Mu Chenxue was surrounded by Feng Xiao and the other women. Moyan Wushang and Wu Dai even went up to join in the fun. They smiled and dressed Mu Chenxue. About a few hours later, Feng Xiao giggled and said in a clear voice, The bride is ready. How is the groom? The groom is ready. It's time to bring the bride in the sedan chair, Long Xiaotian shouted. Feng Xiao gently nodded. With a wave of her sleeve, a hexagonal bridal sedan appeared out of nowhere and supported Mu Chenxue into the bridal sedan. The bridal sedan was surrounded by countless flames. These flames were constantly tumbling, transforming into illusions of phoenixes that spread their wings and soared high into the sky. Relying on these illusions of phoenixes, the bridal sedan was reborn from the flames and floated in midair. Xiao He! Zhuowen stood on top of a mountain and looked at the bridal sedan bathed in flames. He summoned the enormous extreme Nether Saint Dragon. The extreme Abyss Saint Dragon was so huge that it almost covered the sky. The extreme Abyss Saint Dragon let out a long roar and soared into the sky. High up in the sky, the Saint Dragon of Abyssal swung its tail. Howling winds howled, and the space within 10,000 miles completely collapsed. The rosy clouds floating in the 9 heavens fell like meteors, falling from a height of 5,000 kilometers to a height of several thousand meters. Zhuowen roared. He leapt onto the Saint Dragon's huge body and reached out with his right hand. The power of the laws of the void was unleashed to the extreme. Instantly, the space above the 9 heavens was distorted and collapsed by Zhuowen. The countless stars in the sky that were extremely far away slowly sank due to the distortion of space. It was as if the stars in the sky were falling from the sky and were very close to the ground. What's going on? The clouds floating above the 9 heavens sank? The stars in the sky are falling and the earth is shaking violently. What's going on? The clouds in the sky fell and the stars in the sky fell. The entire North Pole was shaking because of this huge movement. The countless living beings living in the North Pole all looked up at the sky. They saw a godlike figure walking through the endless clouds and stars, step by step, amidst the clouds and stars. In the snow palace of the Snow Mountain Range, Yuan Jibai looked up. Her beautiful eyes fell on the figure in the clouds and stars. She had a complicated expression. I heard that Yun came for the saintess of the Burning Heaven sect, Mu Chenxue. Although the battle ended with the Ryuka's victory, Mu Chenxue's memories gradually disappeared and her soul time. The reason he came to my snow palace to take the black crystal ice soul was all for Mu Chen Shui. Looking at the figure in the groom's robes, how could Yuan Jibai not know what Zhuowen wanted to do at this moment? He wanted to marry the woman he loved the most at the last moment. Even if this woman's soul might collapse in the next moment, he still did not regret this decision. Is there really such a sincere love in this world? She did not know why, but when she saw Zhuowen, who planned to marry Mu Chen Shui, stepping on the clouds in the sky, carrying the stars in the sky, Yuan Jibai's frosty expression began to soften. The deepest part of her heart, which had been sealed in ice, seemed to have been faintly touched at this moment. The love that she once did not believe in received a different affirmation from the man in front of her at this moment. Sweet. Raging flames burned the sky. The flames around the bridal sedan became more and more intense. In the end, it turned into a phoenix that was reborn from the flames. This phoenix spread its wings and soared into the sky. The bridal sedan slowly flew into the sky, towards the endless clouds, the stars in the sky, and the proud figure in the middle of the clouds and stars. Zhuowen quietly stood in the void, staring at the bridal sedan that was slowly flying towards him. He was like a child, laughing foolishly. After going through untold hardships and overcoming innumerable difficulties, Zhuowen had finally fulfilled the heroic vow he had made back then. Today, he came with the clouds in the sky and the stars in the sky to marry Mu Chen Shui. Feng Xiao walked to Long Xiaoyan's side and gently snuggled up to his chest. Feng Xiao looked at the figure standing proudly between heaven and earth in the sky. Feng Xiao's eyes were misty as she choked with sobs and said, "Xiao, look, Arjuan has finally grown up. I saw him find his beloved woman, and he also held the most romantic wedding with the clouds and stars. But such a moment is really short. I really want to see the smile on Zhuowen's face. This is the first time in so many days that I have seen him smile, and smile so happily." Long Xiaotian hugged Feng Xiao tightly, but did not answer. Because he knew that any words at this moment were pale and powerless, and he did not know what to say. Therefore, the only thing he could do now was to hold Feng Xiao tightly, watch all this silently, and silently pray and bless Zhuowen in his heart. How can there be no festive music on such a joyous day? Wushang, come and play a few songs. Lu Hantian suddenly said to Moyan Wushang, who was beside him, with a smile. Moyan Wushang nodded gently, and immediately took out a guzheng. His slender jade-like hands plucked back and forth on the strings, playing the music of the wedding banquet. Although he was playing a festive melody, Moyan Wushang's heart was filled with sorrow, and tears involuntarily dripped down. "I'm sorry." Moyan Wushang sobbed. Kanan, Gatha, Mo Lingtian and the others fell into silence. Even the most active Lu Hantian did not speak. Although this was Zhuowen's big day, everyone's heart was filled with dark clouds because they knew that today was the last day for Mu Chen Shui to retain her memory. Zhuowen slowly walked to the front of the bridal sedan and lifted the curtain. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the bridal sedan, and his eyes were suddenly filled with amazement. Her hair was tied up in a phoenix bun, and her eyes were lightly swept. Her eyebrows were filled with spring, and her skin was as smooth as warm jade. Her cherry lips were red without any lipstick, and she was tender and beautiful. 2 strands of hair on her cheeks gently brushed against her face with the wind, adding to her seductive charm. Her eyes were nimble, and she was a little mischievous. She was wearing a fiery red dress, and her slender waist was so beautiful that it could not be grasped. She was so beautiful that she could not be more beautiful. Perhaps it was because she saw Zhuowen's fiery gaze, but the woman in the sedan slightly slanted her beautiful eyes, and her peach cheeks were flushed, like a ripe red apple. Her shy appearance made Zhuowen unable to resist taking a bite. There is a beauty in the north, peerless and independent. A glance can topple a city, a second glance can topple a country. Zhuowen could not help but think of a poem as he looked at the shy and seductive beauty in the bridal sedan. Mu Chen Shui was definitely a country-toppling beauty, a peerless beauty that countless men would fall in love with at first sight. Zhuowen knew that being able to marry this kind of peerless beauty, it was definitely his 3 lifetimes worth of good fortune. "Chen Shui, you're so beautiful," Yuan held it in for a while, but he still said these words in the end. Without knowing why, when Zhuan encountered the matter of getting married, he actually felt nervous. He even began to speak incoherently. In Zhuan's mind, marriage was an important matter in his life. Since he had chosen it, he had no regrets, but at the same time, his heart was filled with anxiety. Seeing Zhuan's nervous appearance, Mu Chenxue gave a laugh. She reached out her jade-like hand and her beautiful eyes turned white. She coquettishly said, "Why aren't you helping me up? Do you want me to keep sitting in the sedan?" All right. Yuan gave a silly laugh and held that jade-like hand. Perhaps he used too much strength, but Mu Chenxue fell into Zhuan's embrace. Mu Chenxue did not even have time to react before Zhuan's hoarse voice sounded in her ears. "Chenxue, marry me, all right? I swore to marry you in the past, but I want to know if it was just my own wishful thinking." Mu Chenxue's cheeks turned red, but she finally said with a gentle nod, "You don't even dislike me, so why should I be indecisive? Only, isn't today the last day?" Hearing this, Yuan slowly raised his head and looked into the sky. He found that the curtain of night had already fallen and the sun hanging high in the sky had already set. A trace of sadness appeared in his eyes. "Let's go see my parents and grandfather," Zhuan said with a smile. Then he pulled Mu Chenxue in front of Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao. Zhuan's grandfather, Long Xiangding, was also present. "Father, mother, and grandfather, today I ask you to preside over this wedding for us." Zhuan pulled Mu Chenxue to kneel on the ground and said to Long Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, and Long Xiangding, "Ha! Good, let this old man preside over this wedding. Being able to see my grandson start a family while I'm still alive, this old man has no regrets." Long Xiangding laughed as he arrived in front of Zhuan and Mu Chenxue. "The peach blossom is bright and dazzling. The son returns home, suitable for his wife. Today, you, Tuan, are willing to take Mu Chenxue as your wife. In the future, we will hold each other's hands and grow old together, never leaving each other, forever and ever." Long Xiangding's expression was extremely serious as he continued, "Today, the heavens and the earth bear witness, and the sun and moon bear witness to your marriage." After that, Yuan held Mu Chenxue's hand and bowed to the heavens and earth, then to Long Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, and Long Xiangding. The couple bowed 3 times. "From now on you are my wife. I am willing to protect you forever and never leave you." Zhuan hugged Mu Chenxue and whispered in a soft voice. Mu Chenxue leaned on Zhuan's chest and nodded gently. In order not to disturb Zhuan and Mu Chenxue, Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao called for the others to leave. After a while, only Zhuan and Mu Chenxue were left on the mountain peak. "Can I still see tomorrow's sunrise?" Mu Chenxue leaned on Zhuan's chest and whispered as if she was dreaming. "Yes, you can do it." Chapter 1589. Collapse. The sky is about to brighten. The sun is about to rise. "And how about I play the zither for you?" A sliver of white appeared in the sky. The pitch-black night seemed to become less cold and gloomy because of this sliver of white. Instead, it became gentler. Mu Chenxue struggled out of Zhuan's embrace. With a wave of her hand, a fiery red zither appeared before her. The zither had the image of a phoenix carved on it. It spread its wings and soared high, reborn from the flames. Wisps of flames burned on the zither's strings. The flames danced, faintly revealing the image of a phoenix. Mu Chenxue's slender hands were placed on the zither. She sat cross-legged in the air. She smiled at Zhuan. The tears on her cheeks flickered with a sorrowful luster. Her slender hands slowly fell. Her slender fingers wandered between the zither strings. The sorrowful zither melody drifted in the air. At this moment, Mu Chenxue was smiling very brightly. However, the luster of the tears on her cheeks was even more dazzling. She was like the blazing sun that was about to rise. Who, holding my hand, restrained my madness for half my life, who, kissing my eyes, covered my wanderings for half my life, who can pour my heart, an inch of land is like emptiness, who can bury my sorrow, laugh at the vanity of heaven and earth, my madness. Holding your hand, accompanying you in your madness for 1,000 lives. Kissing your eyes deeply, accompanying you through 10,000 reincarnations. The melody was leisurely. It was like the flowing water of a high mountain, like the empty spring of a deep valley, like the mountain stream, like the bright moon hanging high in the sky. Accompanied by the beautiful melody, Mu Qinshue's clear and melodious voice, which was like an oriole's, was slowly released. Her voice rose and fell, and it was soul-stirring. The echoes of the empty valley were endless. Listening to the ethereal melody and the sorrowful lyrics, Zhuowen's eyes began to turn red. The song became more and more melodious, more and more resounding. Mu Qinshue's body began to burn with intense flames. A huge phoenix image was born from the flames. It soared into the sky as if it wanted to break free from the shackles of heaven and earth. The sun has risen. The melodious song came to an abrupt end. The flames around Mu Qinshu became even more intense. She lowered her head and leaned deeply against Jun. Her eyes were filled with endless affection, endless reluctance, and endless reluctance to part. Afterwards, Mu Qinshue's smile grew even brighter. She turned around and quietly looked at Zhuowen. Zhuowen, do you still remember what I said? I only want to play this song for you. I only hope that every time I play this song, there will still be a place in my heart that belongs to you. There will still be a memory that belongs only to you. Zhuowen stretched out his hand to pull Mu Qinshu back. However, he realized that what he grabbed was an ethereal flame. Mu Qinshu, who was in the middle of the flame, had cracks on her body. The cracks began to expand and eventually spread to Mu Qinshue's entire body. It was as if at this moment, Mu Qinshu was like a broken porcelain doll that could collapse at any time. Zhuowen, we still watched the last sunrise together. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. Although I want you to sit with me every day to watch the sunrise and sunset together, to play and support each other, I don't have much time left. However, I'm still satisfied because you're by my side at the last moment, accompanying me through these most difficult days. More and more cracks appeared on Mu Qinshue's body. With a flip of his right hand, Zhuowen discovered that the cracks on the surface of the memory pearl had reached its limit. It turned into fine powder and drifted in the air, carried away by the waves. As he watched countless cracks appear on that perfect body, an immense pain assaulted Zhuowen's mind and eyes, causing his vision to become completely blurry. His body trembled slightly, as if countless bombs had exploded in his mind. His pitch-black eyes turned from blank to deep and vicissitudes of life. In the end, his gaze landed on the girl whose body was collapsing. Then, tears began to flow uncontrollably from his eyes. The girl whose delicate body had collapsed amidst the countless flames revealed the most gentle smile in the world, a smile that only bloomed for Zhuowen and himself. Zhuowen hugged his head, then suddenly lifted it up. A heart-wrenching roar resounded from his chest, nose and mouth, reverberating between heaven and earth. That intense sorrow caused the entire sky to darken, causing countless mountains in the surroundings to tremble and collapse. Is she really leaving just like that? One was like a child who had lost his beloved toy. He dashed towards Mu Qinshu without any regard for his own safety. His hands firmly grabbed onto Mu Qinshue's jade-like hands. However, the moment his hands touched Mu Qinshu, he grabbed onto empty air. This was because Mu Qinshue's body had completely collapsed into nothingness, leaving behind only the illusory soul hidden in the depths of her body. Furthermore, Mu Qinshue's soul had also begun to collapse along with the collapse of her body. At this moment, Mu Qinshu had already completely fainted due to the immense pain. In other words, her soul had collapsed and she had fainted. So, at this moment, Feng Xiao brought Long Xiaotian and instantly arrived beside Mu Qinshu. Her beautiful eyes became serious as she said, Chen Shui's memory bead has completely shattered and her sea of consciousness is in chaos. Her body has also collapsed because of the chaos in her sea of consciousness. Now that her body has collapsed, her soul will also enter a state of collapse. We need to quickly take measures to stop Chen Shui's soul from collapsing. After saying this, Feng Xiao slowly reached out her jade-like hand and took out a jade box. Opening the jade box, a sparkling and translucent hexahedral crystal lay quietly within. This crystal was the black crystal ice soul that Zhuowen had obtained from the Snow Palace. Shan, give me a hand and grab this profound crystal ice soul. I need to cast a technique to stop Chen Shui's soul from collapsing first. Feng Xiao suddenly said this to Long Xiaotian. Then she took out the profound crystal ice soul and threw it to Long Xiaotian. Long Xiaotian did not dare to be careless. He waved his right hand and held the mysterious crystal ice soul in the center of his palm. Waves of cold yin energy passed through Long Xiaotian's palm and entered his meridians and even into the depths of his bone marrow. Long Xiaotian could even clearly feel that this chilling power was not as simple as just penetrating into his bone marrow. It was even trying to corrode his soul from the depths of his body. If it wasn't for Long Xiaotian being cautious, perhaps this cold energy would have invaded the depths of his soul. Thinking of this, Long Xiaotian looked at the profound crystal ice soul with eyes filled with dread. This thing was not simple. On the other side, Feng Xiao kept pointing in the air. Each time she pointed, she would leave behind a small purple flame in the air. Feng Xiao's speed was very fast. Her figure was like lightning, instantly leaving behind 99 purple flames in the air. So. The 99 purple flames instantly released terrifying purple flames. Moreover, each flame was connected to each other, complementing each other. The purple flames released by the 99 purple flames instantly connected together, forming a purple fence that surrounded Mu Chenxue. Mu Chenxue, who had been bursting with terrifying flames, was trapped by the purple flame fence. The flames that had been spreading were immediately contained. After the flames were contained, the speed at which Mu Chenxue's soul was collapsing also slowed down. Shang, give me the profound crystal ice soul. Feng Xiao suddenly turned to Long Xiaotian and said. Long Xiaotian did not hesitate. With a wave of his right hand, he gave the profound crystal ice soul to Feng Xiao. At this moment, Feng Xiao's pretty face was extremely dignified. She dragged the profound crystal ice soul with her right hand and then slowly reached into the purple flame fence. She began to slowly approach Mu Chenxue. However, as the profound crystal ice soul continued to approach Mu Chenxue, the flames surrounding Mu Chenxue began to counterattack. These flames condensed into phoenixes that spread their wings and blocked the approach of the profound crystal ice soul. Boom boom boom. Feng Xiao was obviously not a mediocre person. With a stroke of her jade-like hand, the fence formed by the surrounding purple flames began to shrink rapidly, like a constantly shrinking balloon, instantly suppressing the counterattack of the flames. Seeing that the counterattack of the flames had been suppressed, Feng Xiao let out a sigh of relief. Immediately, she quickly placed the profound crystal ice soul on the chest of Mu Chenxue's soul. Buzz buzz buzz. When the profound crystal ice soul was finally placed on Mu Chenxue's chest, the raging flames that were spreading around Mu Chenxue's soul were finally restrained. If one looked carefully, one could clearly see that the profound crystal ice soul on Mu Chenxue's chest began to continuously produce a powerful chill. This chill penetrated deep into the bone marrow and finally completely suppressed the flames that were released from Mu Chenxue's body. As the chill continued to spread, the collapse of Mu Chenxue's soul was also alleviated. Chapter 1590. Entering the dark corpse forbidden ground again when Mu Chenxue was completely frozen, Feng Xiao was drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. It was clear that using the mysterious crystal ice soul to seal Mu Chenxue's soul had consumed a lot of her energy. Long Xiaotian rushed to Feng Xiao's side and asked in a worried voice, Xiao, are you all right? Don't worry, I just consumed a lot of energy. Speaking of which, I think we should be more worried about Zhuan. Chen Shui, Feng Xiao shook her head, then her beautiful eyes turned and fell on Zhuan not far away. At this moment, Zhuan looked like he had lost his soul. He stared blankly at Mu Chenxue who was frozen in front of him. He wanted to reach out to touch Mu Chenxue, but he found that the fence formed by the purple flames blocked his hand. Zhuan didn't try to destroy the purple flames outside. Instead, he quietly looked through the gap in the fence and looked at the woman lying peacefully in the void. He only felt that his eyes were very dry. Now is not the time to be sad. Whether Chen Shui can be saved or not depends on you. Long Xiaotian came to Zhuowen's side and patted Zhuowen's shoulder with great caution. Zhuowen slowly raised his head and looked at Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao's hopeful eyes. At the same time, he saw Lu Hantian, Mo Yen Wushang, and his other friends and Ryuka's relatives behind him. Soon, Zhuowen's eyes calmed down. Long Xiaoyan was right, he shouldn't be sad right now. There were still many things he needed to do. Can the Celestial Saint Master really cure Chen Shui's collapsed soul? Zhuowen transmitted his voice to Xiao He in his sea of consciousness. Xiao He pondered for a moment and said, "In theory, it can be cured. After all, Saint Masters have already touched the threshold of the soul. Their research on the soul is far above other arcana masters. As for your little lover, the problem lies in her soul, so finding the Celestial Saint Master is definitely the right choice. He will definitely have a corresponding solution." Zhuowen nodded solemnly. Xiao He was right. He and the entire Ryuka were completely helpless about Mu Chenshue's condition. Only by going to the Central Plains and finding the Saint Master would they be able to find a solution. Chen Shui's soul has already been frozen, but how do you plan on placing her soul? Feng Xiao arrived in front of Zhuowen and asked in a somewhat worried voice. Compared to the physical body, the soul was extremely fragile. If it wasn't properly taken care of, it could easily cause problems. Once something happened to the soul, everything would be destroyed. At that time, even if Mu Chenshue's soul was frozen due to the mysterious crystal ice soul, it could also completely collapse due to bad storage. First of all, you have to give your little lover a coffin that is hard enough to seal her inside. Even external forces won't be able to affect her soul, Xiao He said with a chuckle. A coffin? I wonder if the demon sealing green coffin can be used? Zhuowen flicked his right hand and took out a huge bronze coffin. This was the demon sealing green coffin used to suppress the blood demon. Ever since the blood demon was released by Zhuowen, the demon sealing green coffin had been left idle in Zhuowen's spirit ring. Xiao He shook her head and said, "The demon sealing green coffin is really too fragile. Even an ordinary profound saint artifact would be able to destroy it. Are you sure you want to put your little lover inside this demon sealing green coffin?" Zhuowen's expression changed slightly. Xiao He was right. The demon sealing green coffin was really too fragile. Speaking of which, this demon sealing green coffin was brought out by him from the Origin Chi Tower. Compared to him at that time, the demon sealing green coffin was really hard. However, that was only relative to him at that time. At that time, Yuan was only at the ultimate emperor realm. Now that he was at the profound saint realm, even if he didn't use a profound saint artifact, Zhuowen might be able to completely crush this demon sealing green coffin with one hand. Could it be that you have an even harder coffin? Zhuowen asked doubtfully. Haha, of course I do. At this point, Xiao He suddenly laughed, and his laughter was extremely wretched. He moved closer to Zhuowen and said, "There are so many dead people buried in the serene corpse forbidden grounds. There must be a coffin suitable for your little lover, and the quality of the coffins there are basically many times higher than this demon sealing green coffin." Hearing Xiao He's wretched laughter, Zhuowen's expression became somewhat ugly. He couldn't help but recall the scene of him being chased by the tomb guards of the true immortal tomb. How terrifying were the tomb guards! Zhuowen still had some lingering fear. If it weren't for the first mountain god, he might have died on the spot. Xiao He also noticed Zhuowen's somewhat ugly expression. He waved his hand and said, "Don't worry. This time, I won't let you take the risk to go to the area of the divine tomb. Instead, I'll let you go to the area where the heaven sages or profound sages are. Although the coffins of those dead people may not be as hard as the coffins of the divine tomb and the true immortal tomb, they are definitely much harder than the bronze coffin in your hand." Zhuowen completely understood Xiao He's meaning this time. He planned to let him enter the serene corpse extremis again and snatch the coffins of the dead people there. Moreover, Xiao He seemed to be instigating him this time. Zhuowen knew that this guy was probably up to no good again. "You want me to snatch things from the dead?" Zhuan asked with an ashen face. Xiao He grinned, not caring about Zhuowen's ugly expression at all. He continued, "Do you really want your little lover to lie in such a tattered coffin? If there is a great battle in the future, if you carry this demon-sealing green coffin with you or in your spirit ring, the aftermath of the battle may affect your little lover sealed in the coffin. Of course, if you plan to place this demon-sealing green coffin in a secret place, then just pretend that I didn't say anything." At this point, Xiao He shrugged, and a sly look appeared in Xiao He's eyes. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He suddenly opened the demon-sealing green coffin, gently picked up Mu Chenxue, and placed her inside the coffin. Then he sealed the bronze coffin. "Boy, do you really plan to use this demon-sealing green coffin? Let me tell you, this quality is not safe. If something happens to your little lover, don't blame me for not warning you." Blackie was stunned, and then he started to grumble by Zhuowen's ear like a gossipy woman. Zhuowen handed the demon-sealing green coffin to Zhuo Xiaotian and Feng Xiao and said cautiously, "Father, Mother, I hope you can keep this coffin for me for a while. I have some things to deal with. Also, I plan to leave the Azure Dragon Palace in the southern barbarian lands. Ryuka will temporarily stay in the southern barbarian lands. I don't know where the young master of the Ice and Fire family has gone. During this period of time, Ryuka should hide and avoid this storm before returning to the eastern barbarian lands." Feng Xiao and Long Xiaotian took the demon-sealing green coffin and said cautiously to Zhuon, "Don't worry, we will keep this bronze coffin for you. But what do you plan to do?" Long Xiaotian and the others also knew about the Ice and Fire family. They knew the seriousness of this matter and naturally didn't dare to go back to the eastern barbarian lands. At the very least, they must first send people to the eastern barbarian lands to inquire about it and wait for a while before they dare to move Ryuka back. As for the conversation between Zhuowen and Xiao He, it was in the form of sound transmission, so Feng Xiao and Long Xiaotian didn't know the specific content of the conversation between Zhuowen and Xiao He. Of course, even if they knew, they probably wouldn't know what kind of place the Nether Corpse Danger Ground was. Regarding the Nether Corpse Danger Ground, only Zhuowen and the Jia family knew about it. The rest of the people were extremely unfamiliar with it. After exhorting Long Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, and the Ryuka, Zhuan temporarily handed the Azure Dragon token to Long Xiaotian for safekeeping. With the Azure Dragon token, Long Xiaotian can temporarily control the Azure Dragon Hall. After doing this, Zhuan took a deep look at the bronze coffin, then immediately used the Void Law to escape into the void and disappeared before everyone's eyes. At the border between the eastern lands and the southern barbarian lands, there was a huge gully between the two regions. This gully was so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. It was pitch black, and it was impossible to see what kind of danger was hidden in the gully. Not far from the ravine, there were some scattered buildings, and there were many people coming and going in the buildings. These were the people of the Jia family. Since the problem of the Demon Saint's curse was solved, the surface of this area was no longer threatened by the curse, so the Jia family moved back to the surface. Zhuan didn't have the intention to go up and greet the Jia family. Instead, he took a step forward and instantly dived into the depths of the gully. With Yuowen's extraordinary memory, he quickly found the cave that hid the entrance to the Nether Corpse Danger Ground. When he arrived at the entrance of the cave, Yuowen didn't rush in. Instead, he wandered around for a moment and his gaze fell on the 9 golden lines on the surface of the cave. These 9 golden lines were the seal released by the first mountain god, which was also the 9-turn golden split rune that Zhuowen had cultivated. The first mountain god's attainment in the 9-turn golden split rune was undoubtedly many times higher than Zhuowen's, or it could be said that he far surpassed Zhuowen. Therefore, when he looked at the 9-turn golden split rune in front of the cave, Zhuowen felt as if he was suddenly enlightened. You have cultivated the 9-cycle golden crack pattern. Although it is very difficult to break the seal set by the first mountain god, you can rely on the 9-cycle golden crack pattern that you have cultivated and slowly explore. Then, you can pass through the seal and enter the other side of the seal, Blackie said calmly. Yes, I can give it a try when the time comes, but before entering I plan to completely absorb the burning flame nectar. Maybe I can break through again and reach the shattering profound Saint realm. Chapter 1591. This mysterious Saint Realm Zhuowen clenched his right hand, and the phoenix crystal shattered. The 5,000-year-old burning flame nectar contained within spewed out like flames, transforming into numerous phoenix phantoms that spread their wings and soared into the sky. These phoenix phantoms were formed by the burning flame nectar. Wherever they passed, the sound of flowing water could be heard. Of course, as the 5,000-year-old burning flame nectar, this thing was quite intelligent. The moment Zhuowen's big hand reached out, the burning flame nectar began to dodge left and right in an attempt to avoid Zhuowen's attack. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and waved his right hand. The power of his saint body erupted. The golden light covered his right arm, and in an instant, his right arm became vast and terrifying. He grabbed the escaping burning flame nectar in his palm. At the same time, the acupuncture points all over Zhuowen's body suddenly opened. These acupuncture points were like lively mouths, constantly swallowing the surrounding burning flame nectar. Although the phoenix phantoms formed by the burning flame nectar fled in panic, they couldn't resist the suction force at all. They were all absorbed by the acupuncture points. When all the burning flame nectar was absorbed by Zhuowen's acupuncture points, Zhuowen's face flushed red as if he had been holding his breath for a long time. It looked extremely strange. If one were to observe Zhuowen's body, they would be able to notice that the meridians in Zhuowen's body were almost completely filled with the burning flame nectar. The burning flame nectar was formed by the magma in the Earth's core, and it contained an extremely terrifying temperature. If an ordinary person were to absorb all 5,000-year-old burning flame nectar into their body like Zhuowen, they would definitely explode and die because they couldn't withstand it. However, Zhuowen was different. He had a saint body, and his body was terrifyingly tough. He could withstand the terrifying heat. At this moment, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly as he sat cross-legged on the ground. His body began to rapidly refine the burning flame nectar, refining it into the purest form of energy that flowed into his dantian, constantly strengthening the saint energy in his body. Moreover, as he continued to refine the burning flame nectar's energy, wisps of white smoke began to rise above Zhuowen's head. Days passed, and Zhuowen had been sitting cross-legged at the entrance of the cave for more than a month. In the past month or so, Zhuowen had been refining the burning flame nectar's energy almost every day, and with the continuous refining, the saint energy in his body was growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Rumble! Suddenly, a thunderous sound burst out from Zhuowen's body, and Zhuowen abruptly opened his eyes. At this moment, his eyes were bright and full of vigor, as if there was a god living in his eyes that could see through everything. A vast and incomparable power slowly surged from his body, and finally rushed to the top of his head and soared into the sky. The terrifying saint energy almost pierced through the black fog that lingered above the gully. Zhuowen's aura also rose to a level that made people tremble in fear. It was as if Zhuowen's every move had the power to shatter mountains and shatter the earth. What a terrifying aura! Could it be that another powerful existence has appeared in the gully? Not far from the surface of the gully, the Jia family members who were rebuilding their homes trembled all over after sensing the terrifying aura. Many of them even knelt on the ground with a plop. This aura was too terrifying, and it crushed their bodies, making them unable to resist. It was as if they could be crushed by this aura at any time. Fortunately, this aura came and went quickly. Very quickly, it disappeared without a trace. This caused many members of the Jia clan to heave a sigh of relief. However, at the same time, they were extremely puzzled about the identity of the owner of this aura. Zhuowen slowly stood up, his eyes bright and his aura vast. At this moment, the nascent soul in his dantian had been completely shattered into countless pieces. Originally, the nascent soul should have looked like a miniature version of Zhuowen's baby, but now it was shattered into pieces, as if it had been dismembered into thousands of pieces. It looked extremely strange. Although the nascent soul had been shattered, Zhuowen didn't feel any discomfort. Instead, the saint energy in his dantian was even more powerful and endless. The fifth mystic of the profound saint stage, the shattering profound saint stage, actually shattered the nascent soul to obtain a greater capacity of saint energy. Feeling the surging saint energy in his dantian, Yuan was pleasantly surprised. This saint energy was much more powerful than the fourth mystic's pure profound saint stage. Although the most important nascent soul had been shattered, the quantity and quality of the saint energy had undergone a great transformation. No wonder the fifth mystic of the profound saint stage was called the shattering profound saint stage. Moreover, Yuan knew that the shattered fragments of the nascent soul in his dantian would gather again when he advanced to the quintessential saint stage, and finally form a golden Yuan Dan. The Yuan Dan was tougher than the nascent soul, and the saint energy it could contain was also more vast. It could be said that Zhuowen's dantian was a kind of container, a container that could contain all the energy in his body. It was true that it could increase one's strength and absorb more energy, but it was more important to have a container that could contain more energy. Think about it, if you absorbed a lot of energy, but your body couldn't contain so much energy, then the energy would only be wasted when it was absorbed into your body, and you wouldn't be able to use it. After breaking through to the Xian-shattering saint realm, Yuan was confident that even if he didn't rely on heaven-defying saint treasures, he could still fight against a sky saint realm saint. Of course, it was still difficult for Yuan to defeat a sky saint stage saint. Although his cultivation had reached the shattering profound saint stage and his physical body had reached the great success saint physique, it was still difficult for him to defeat a sky saint stage saint. However, Yuan had only achieved the great success holy body for a short period of time. Even though he had cultivated the first 3 turns of the 9-turn golden pattern, which made his great success holy body far more powerful than a beginner great success holy body, there was still a limit to how powerful it could be. After all, the saint body needed to be strengthened step by step. A treasured sword needed to be sharpened. If a treasured sword wanted to become sharp and tough, it needed to go through many years of forging and a suitable secret technique. The same was true for the saint body. If Yuan didn't have the appropriate herbs to train his physique, then it would be very difficult for him to quickly train his saint body to perfection. After arriving at the cave seal, Yuan stared at the seal in front of him. There were 9 glittering golden patterns on the surface of the seal. Each of the 9 golden lines was like a small sun, blazing and dazzling. Moreover, each of the golden lines was extremely mysterious. They faintly revealed a sharpness that gave one the feeling of a sharp sword cutting through one's throat. The first mountain god is indeed the founder of the 9-turn golden pattern. The power of the 9-turn golden pattern that he drew is really terrifying. Feeling the terrifying power of the 9-turn golden pattern in front of him, Yuan couldn't help but sigh. There was no doubt that the 9-turn golden pattern in front of him was much more powerful than the 3 golden patterns he had drawn before. For example, the golden pattern in front of him was as bright as the moon, while the golden pattern on the surface of Zhuowen's body was as dim as the light of a firefly. I don't know if the 3 golden patterns on my body can really cause the seal to resonate. After all, both of them come from the same source. Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. Then, the 3 golden patterns on his body burst out with a blazing golden light. The 3 golden patterns surrounded Zhuowen's body like the most loyal bodyguards. With the help of the 3 golden patterns, Zhuowen slowly stretched out his right hand. Then, he was shocked to find that the seal formed by the 9-turn golden pattern in front of him was transparent in his right hand. His right hand directly went through it. Sure enough, the 9-turn golden pattern on your body and the 9-turn golden pattern on this seal come from the same source. So, as long as you use the power of the 9-turn golden pattern, you can cause the seal to resonate. It won't stop you from entering. Xiao He flew out of Zhuowen's sea of consciousness like a black lightning bolt. It then sat on Zhuowen's shoulder calmly, shaking its head as it spoke. Zhuowen nodded. Then he took a deep breath and took a step forward. Zhuowen entered the seal without any obstruction. The scene in front of Zhuowen was not unfamiliar to him. The scenery in front of him was filled with green mountains and clear waters. The mountains were like coiling dragons and the mountain ranges were like serpents. Immortal mist filled the air, waterfalls flowed down, and old trees soared into the sky, their branches like mist. The scene in the Nether Corp's forbidden ground, looking from afar, looked like a paradise on earth. However, this paradise on earth was destroyed by the coffins that were everywhere. Some coffins were embedded in the walls, some were placed on the trees like bird nests, and there were also some that floated in the stream. It could be said that this paradise on earth was filled with coffins that could be seen everywhere. Of course, in the white mist-filled atmosphere, there was a faint deathly aura. This deathly aura was everywhere in the Nether Corp's forbidden ground. Xiaohei, there are so many coffins here. Which one is more suitable for Chen Shui? Zhuan looked at Xiaohei on his shoulder and asked. Xiaohei looked around and shook her head. This is only the outermost layer of the Nether Corp's forbidden ground. Most of the people buried here are profound sages, and there are even some half-step sages buried in some remote places. How can there be any good coffins here? Let's go deeper. Hearing this, Zhuowen's face turned cold. He could not help but think of his fearless appearance. At that time, he had directly charged into the deepest part of the Nether Corp's forbidden ground, the Tomb of the Gods. At that time, it was because of Xiaohei's familiarity with this area that he did not encounter any great danger in the Nether Corp's forbidden ground and finally reached the Tomb of the Gods. But it was also because of this that he violated a taboo in the Tomb of the Gods and was chased by the tomb guards of the true immortal tomb. Don't worry, this Dragon Master will not let you fall into danger. I will not let you enter the Tomb of the Gods. Perhaps because she noticed Zhuowen's slightly ugly expression, Xiaohei rubbed her chin and said with a mischievous smile. Then, are you planning to go to the periphery of the Tomb of the Gods to look for suitable coffins? Zhuowen asked curiously. Chapter 1592. Cave Master of Snow Lotus Cave. Zhuowen was extremely cautious as he slowly ventured deeper into the serene corpse forbidden ground. He was constantly paying attention to his surroundings. Under Xiaohei's guidance, Zhuowen passed through mountain after mountain, river after river, and forest after forest. After 3 days and 3 nights, he finally stopped at the top of a mountain. There was a huge plateau in front of the mountain. The top of the plateau was covered in white snow as if it was covered in a layer of white gauze. At the center of the plateau stood a huge and majestic palace. In front of the palace stood a towering stone tablet. The surface of the stone tablet was densely engraved with words that Zhuowen could not understand. Furthermore, the words were not still. Instead, they were wriggling like tadpoles. It was an extremely strange sight. With her previous experience, Zhuowen didn't foolishly stare at the inscriptions on the stone tablet. He knew that the words on the tablet contained an extremely powerful divine might. If he stared at them, he might be directly affected by the divine might. Afterwards, Zhuowen looked at the 4 corners of the plateau. He saw that there were 4 huge tombs in the 4 directions of the central palace. Although the tombs were not as majestic as the central palace, they were much more luxurious and majestic than most of the burial grounds that Zhuowen had visited. 4 huge statues stood in the 4 tombs. The 4 statues faced the central palace and knelt on one knee as if they were worshipping the master of the divine tomb. The 4 tombs were the true immortal tombs, and the 4 statues were the tomb guards of the true immortal tombs. Last time, Zhuowen had said something that he should not have. In the end, one of the tomb guards chased after him, causing Zhuowen to flee in panic. In the end, if it were not for the first mountain god, Zhuowen would have been in deep trouble. Let's search around this plateau. As long as you don't say anything taboo, the Dao soldiers guarding these 4 true immortal tombs won't come out into the world. After all, every time they do, they will use up the energy stored within the true immortal tombs, Blackie said. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. Immediately, he leaped down from the mountain peak and slowly walked along the edge of the plateau. There were various terrains on the edge of the plateau. There were mountains, plains, hills, forests, valleys, and so on. Zhuowen even saw a large desert. There was a huge stone tablet in every terrain. Behind the stone tablet was a tomb. The owners of the tombs were no ordinary saints. Zhuowen carefully walked past them. He discovered that most of the owners of the tombs were earth immortals. Occasionally, there would be tombs of heavenly immortals as well. In other words, every tomb was extremely powerful to Zhuowen. Tombs of earth immortals and heavenly immortals. Zhuowen's expression was slightly unsightly. Even if such an existence was dead, that strand of pressure was probably not something that Zhuowen could contend against at the moment. Moreover, with the personalities of the tomb owners, it was impossible for them not to set up powerful defensive measures or terrifying traps in their tombs. If Zhuowen accidentally stepped into one of these traps, he would probably be doomed with his current strength. Zhuowen, who was originally walking on the road, suddenly stopped in his tracks. His gaze fell on the area in front of him, which was covered in ice and snow. The region spanning several dozen kilometers was covered in ice and snow. Snowflakes drifted through the air, just like the scenery of the northern kingdom. In this cold and snowy weather, there was a stone stele of ice and snow that was several hundred feet tall. Beside the stone stele stood a lifelike statue of a woman. The woman was as cold as ice. Her snow-white hair hung loosely on her shoulders. Her long skirt touched the ground. Her entire body was filled with a cold and elegant feeling. This statue should be the tomb owner's tomb guard. My initial estimation is that it probably possesses a trace of the Tao might of an earth immortal. Moreover, I'm not unfamiliar with the tomb owner of this tomb. Xiao He rubbed his chin and chuckled as he looked at the tomb that stood silently in the ice and snow from afar. You know him? Zhuowen asked in surprise. Yes, the tomb owner of this tomb is the tomb of the cave master of a rather powerful force called the Snow Lotus Cave in the Heavenly Armor continent 30,000 years ago. If I'm not wrong, this cave master ought to be the 37th cave master. He's also the one with the greatest talent and the strongest cultivation among all the previous cave masters of the Snow Lotus Cave. He's the only Earth Immortal Saint Stage expert among all the previous cave masters of the Snow Lotus Cave. However, the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave offended an existence that he shouldn't have offended, so he was pursued all over the world. In the end, he suffered a heavy injury and was on the verge of death. The Snow Lotus Cave paid a great price to bury him in the Nethercorp's extremity. The forces of the Snow Lotus Cave declined later on. In the end, it completely vanished in the river of time during the calamity 10,000 years ago. Xiao He spoke tirelessly. He was extremely familiar with the tomb of the Snow Lotus Cave. Speaking of which, the coffin of the Snow Lotus Cave's cave master is more suitable for your little lover. However, it's slightly difficult for you to obtain the coffin of the cave master with your strength, Xiao He continued. Zhuowen smiled bitterly. Most of the dead people buried in the outer area of the divine tomb were earthly immortals and heavenly immortals. These were terrifying existences that could summon the wind and summon the rain when they were alive. Even if they were dead, the trace of pressure that leaked out from them was not something that Zhuowen could endure. However, this Dragon Lord has a method that can temporarily lure the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave away. At that time, you only need to obtain the coffin inside, Xiao He suddenly said. What method? Zhuowen's eyes flickered with a bright light. Follow me to a place first. When we arrive, I'll tell you the specific method in detail. Xiao He kept Zhuowen in suspense. Then, he jumped down from Zhuowen's shoulder and flew in another direction. After a while, Xiao He arrived at a pitch-black swamp. The swamp was surrounded by a dense black forest. Black bubbles kept rising from the surface of the swamp, which was filled with a dense death qi. Looking at the swamp, Zhuowen was puzzled. He did not know why Xiao He brought him here. Could it be that there was something mysterious about this place? Xiao He's small eyes revealed a dignified expression. He turned into a puff of black smoke and flew above the swamp. Then, he let out a shrill cry and dived into the depths of the swamp like a swimming fish. Although Zhuowen had many doubts in his heart, he did not voice them out directly. Instead, he waited silently. He knew that Xiao He naturally had his reasons for doing so. Moreover, Zhuowen faintly felt that Xiao He probably had his own motives for encouraging him to enter the Serene Corpse Extremis. Other than helping him find a suitable coffin for Mu Chenxue, he probably had his own motives. As for what his motives were, it was likely related to the black swamp in front of him. Zhuowen did not have to wait for long. Magnificent waves began to surge from the surface of the black swamp in front of him. Pillars of water soared into the sky and sprinkled down from the sky, forming layers of black rain that fell on the ground. Amidst the endless black rain, something seemed to be trying to break out from the depths of the swamp. Zhuan looked over and was stunned to see a giant coffin slowly emerging from the swamp. This giant coffin was only the tip of the iceberg, but Zhuan was deeply shocked by it. This coffin was simply too big. Even the small part of it that was exposed above the water surface was like a small mountain. The impression it gave to Zhuan was that it was enormous. Endless waves surged up from the swamp. As the giant coffin continued to rise, the surface of the swamp became even more turbulent. When the giant coffin completely appeared in front of Zhuan's eyes, Zhuan's heart trembled. This giant coffin was simply too big. At a glance, there seemed to be no end to it. Zhuan estimated that this giant coffin was at least several dozen feet in size. It was like a giant mountain lying in the air. On top of the giant coffin, Xiaohe stretched out its little paw and gently stroked the patterns on the surface of the coffin. A complicated look appeared in its eyes, as if it was recalling something. How many years has it been? I didn't expect this ancient coffin to still be here. Xiaohe muttered to itself. At this moment, Zhuan began to carefully examine the giant coffin that was floating in front of him. The four sides of the giant coffin were clearly defined, and each side was fastened with chains. On the surface of the giant coffin, there were various patterns engraved. However, upon closer inspection, these patterns were actually a giant dragon totem with its wings spread out. Moreover, this giant dragon totem was extremely similar to Xiaohe's original body. Xiaohe once said that its physical body was almost destroyed 10,000 years ago. Out of desperation, it buried itself in the Nether Corp's forbidden ground in hopes of prolonging its life. However, due to its severe injuries, Xiaohe eventually gave up on its physical body and its soul left the Nether Corp's forbidden ground. At this point, Zhuan's eyes shone with a sharp light. He had a vague idea of what this giant coffin was. Kid, you're right. This giant coffin is called the Abyss Dragon Coffin. When this Lord Dragon's aura was still present, this Lord Dragon wantonly plundered the resources of the Central Plains to create this giant coffin. This Lord Dragon's body is also buried in this giant coffin, Xiaohe said with a look of reminiscence. Plundered? Zhuan's eyes twitched. It seemed that Xiaohe was a ruthless person back then. Even when it was injured, it still plundered the Central Plains without restraint. Moreover, it seemed that it was only natural for it to do so. The Abyss Dragon Holy Dragon was probably very powerful back then. Even if it plundered, no one dared to oppose it. It's already been several thousand years. I wonder what happened to this Lord Dragon's body? Xiaohe asked with a complicated gaze. At this moment, Zhuan also rushed to the side of the giant coffin with a curious look. Then, he gently pushed the lid of the coffin with his right hand as if he wanted to open it. Kid, this Lord Dragon coffin was personally sealed by this Lord Dragon. You won't be able to open it, Xiaohe said with a frown. However, just as Xiaohe finished speaking, there was a rumbling sound. The seemingly airtight lid of the coffin actually slowly opened a crack. Black lines appeared on Xiaohe's face when he saw this. Chapter 1593. Supreme Nether Dragon Coffin. The corner of Xiaohe's mouth twitched. He was dumbstruck. Perhaps even he did not expect this scene to happen. There doesn't seem to be any seal on the coffin. Zhuan stared blankly at the giant coffin that had been opened a crack. How is this possible? Before this Dragon Lord left, I did indeed seal this giant coffin. How could this be? Xiaohe roared and waved his little claws. Immediately, the coffin lid was lifted up, revealing the pitch-black world inside the coffin. Without a doubt, there was nothing inside the giant coffin. Not to mention the dragon corpse, there was not even a mosquito. This, Xiaohe was stunned. Even Zhuan narrowed his eyes. He realized that something was wrong. Could it be that the dragon corpse was stolen? Zhuan asked in confusion. Blackie's expression was extremely ugly. The dragon corpse was his physical body. Although his physical body had almost collapsed and could not be restored due to the great battle 10,000 years ago, it was still his physical body in any case. If it was taken away by someone else just like that, it was undoubtedly provoking him. After being silent for a long time, Xiaohe took a deep breath and roared at the sky. Fuck 18 generations of your mother, you fucking bastard thief. One day, this dragon lord will find you and dig up the ancestral graves of 18 generations of your ancestors. Motherfucker, you dare to provoke this dragon lord and even take away this dragon lord's dragon corpse. One day, I will make sure that all 18 generations of your ancestors will not be able to rest in peace. Xiao He almost went berserk. His saliva flew everywhere as he cursed continuously. He was flustered and exasperated. His curses were extremely unpleasant to the ears, causing Zhuowen, who was listening from the side, to feel a little embarrassed. He muttered in his heart, when did this Xiao He learn to curse so much? Not long after, Xiao He slowly calmed down. However, from the hair all over his body that was constantly standing on end, it could be seen that this fellow's anger had not subsided. Although its physical body was on the verge of collapse and it could not be used, it was still its physical body. It would not be in a good mood if it was stolen just like that. Fortunately, Xiao He did not lose its rationality. Its little eyes kept darting around as if it was thinking about something. In the end, it sighed softly and said helplessly, looking at the seal on the surface of this giant coffin, I'm afraid that it has been broken for nearly 1,000 years. 1,000 years ago, I don't know which bastard stole this dragon's corpse. At this point, Xiao He gnashed her teeth in anger. In the end, there was nothing she could do. After all, her soul had already left her body and she no longer had any connection with her physical body. Is there any way to find your body? Zhuowen asked. Xiao He shook its head and said, although that was my original physical body, it was a pity that my soul had already completely lost its connection with my physical body when I left my body. Therefore, upon hearing this, Zhuowen knew that it was almost impossible for Xiao He to find his dragon corpse. After all, no one knew who had stolen his dragon corpse. The tomb closest to my tomb is the tomb of the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave. It seems like I have to ask the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave if I want to know the whole story. Go and listen to me later. I guarantee that you will be able to successfully obtain the coffin of the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave. Although Xiao He was furious, it did not lose its rationality. It secretly transmitted its voice to Zhuowen for a while before it entered the giant coffin with a swoosh and closed the giant coffin. Brat, remember what I said. When the time comes, you have to act quickly. Although this Dragon Lord's coffin still has the power from back then, after such a long time of precipitation, coupled with the fact that the seal inside has been forcibly broken, I'm afraid it won't last for long. Xiao He's voice slowly sounded out. Soon after, the giant coffin suddenly floated in the air. An earth-shaking dragon roar erupted from the giant coffin. Soon after, Yuan was shocked to discover that the patterns on the surface of the giant coffin seemed to have come alive as they emitted a terrifying ink-black light. The ink-black light grew increasingly dense. Finally, it soared into the sky and transformed into a giant dragon shadow. From the shape of the dragon shadow, one could tell that it was the silhouette of the Abyss Saint Dragon. The dragon shadow swooped down and carried the giant coffin towards the tomb of the Snow Lotus Cave. Soon, it entered the region of ice and snow. The stone tablet erected in the tomb of the Snow Lotus Cave suddenly erupted with light. Soon after, the statue of the ice-cold woman suddenly moved. The ice-cold woman's statue opened her eyes. She coldly stared at the giant coffin carried by the giant dragon shadow and said in a deep voice, "The Abyss Saint Dragon? Why have you come to my tomb? You are in the dead swamp and I am in the region of ice and snow. The two tombs have not interfered with each other. What is the meaning of this?" Rumble. The giant coffin suddenly soared through the air and violently smashed in front of the tombstone. The giant coffin was so big that the tombstone only took up 1% of the giant coffin. It looked like an ant. Even the tomb guards of the Snow Lotus Cave's tomb and the ice-cold woman statue were insignificant compared to the enormous coffin. A mere tomb guard has no right to speak in front of me. Scram. An unrestrained voice was emitted from the huge coffin. Immediately, the dragon roared at the sky. It suddenly opened its mouth and ruthlessly bit at the Dao soldier guarding the tomb with the intention of devouring it. The ice-cold woman's statue was expressionless. Seeing the dragon shadow attack, She stretched out her hand and countless icicles condensed and shot towards the dragon shadow. Unfortunately, the dragon shadow's power was too terrifying. The icicles shot out by the ice-cold woman statue were destroyed like mud entering a river. Then, the dragon shadow's huge body suddenly swept up the ice-cold woman statue and completely engulfed it. The moment the tomb guard was destroyed by the dragon shadow, a terrifying aura suddenly came from the depths of the Snow Lotus Cave's tomb. The aura became more and more terrifying. In the end, the entire world of ice and snow began to sweep up, turning into a terrifying snowstorm. Even the nearby cemeteries were affected by the terrifying snowstorm. Juan, who was hiding in the dark, looked at the earth-shaking snowstorm and couldn't help but tremble with fear. The cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave was indeed an earthly immortal saint when she was alive. Just the power that leaked out was already so terrifying. Of course, what surprised Juon even more was that the supreme nether dragon coffin that Xiao He created when she was alive was actually able to let Xiao He display such terrifying power by relying on the trace of power left in the coffin. The tomb guards of the Snow Lotus Cave's tomb couldn't resist at all. Supreme Nether Dragon, don't you think you've gone too far? An extremely cold voice came from the depths of the raging snowstorm. Then, a 3-meter-wide ice coffin suddenly floated at the center of the snowstorm. The ice coffin was sparkling and translucent. Inside the ice coffin lay a beautiful ice-cold woman with her eyes slightly closed. The ice-cold woman looked somewhat similar to the Tomb Guardian Dao Soldier. Most likely, the Tomb Guardian Dao Soldier had been carved based on the ice-cold woman's appearance. You've finally come out. This Dragon Lord has arrived and you let a mere tomb guard welcome me. Aren't you looking down on this Dragon Lord too much? Xiao He said fearlessly. The ice coffin floated quietly above the snowstorm. She seemed to be afraid of Xiao He and didn't immediately attack. Speaking of which, the supreme nether dragon had been buried in the dark corpse forbidden ground 20,000 years later than her, but she didn't dare to be careless. She knew very well that the supreme nether dragon had forcefully opened the coffin and annihilated the original master of the Dead Swamp in order to seize the feng shui of the Dead Swamp. Moreover, the original master of the Deathly Swamp was even more famous than her when he was alive, and his strength was even greater than hers. Therefore, the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave did not dare to provoke the great Abyss Saint Dragon after he was buried in the Deathly Swamp. For nearly 10,000 years, the two neighboring tombs had coexisted peacefully. Now, the cave master of Snow Lotus Cave was very surprised. Why did the supreme nether dragon suddenly come looking for her? When Xiao He's soul left his body, he did it very secretly. Therefore, the cave master of Snow Lotus Cave, who was the closest to the Dead Swamp, didn't realize that the Dead Swamp was actually a dragon corpse without a soul. The cave master of Snow Lotus Cave was silent for a moment before she said in a deep voice, "Speak. You shouldn't have come looking for me for no reason. Why have you come looking for me now?" Xiao He grinned and said, "Could it be that you didn't notice anything unusual about the Deathly Swamp during these 1,000 years? Or perhaps you didn't notice anyone coming to the Deathly Swamp?" Hearing this, the cave master of Snow Lotus Cave's closed eyes trembled slightly. In the end, she said softly, "I have been asleep for a very long time. Moreover, I didn't deliberately pay attention to the Dead Swamp. However, I do remember an incident from 1,000 years ago that left a deep impression on me." "What is it?" Xiao He quickly asked. "It was about 1,000 years ago. I remember that a group of people came to the Serene Corpse extremity. Moreover, their strength wasn't weak. The leader of the group was an earthly immortal realm old man. At that time, this group of people came to my tomb. They actually planned to open my tomb and take the treasures in my tomb. However, I drove them away." The cave master of Snow Lotus Cave casually continued. "After this group of people failed, they quickly retreated. I remember that this group of people left for the Dead Swamp. If this group of people really entered the Dead Swamp, I believe that you know better than me what happened inside." Xiao He fell silent. Soon after, he continued, "Then do you know if this group of people had any special symbols?" The cave master of Snow Lotus Cave frowned slightly as if she was in deep thought. A moment later, she said, "If we are talking about special symbols, Then there is one person in this group that left a deep impression on me. This person was blind, wore a wide robe, and was a very young girl. However, there was no energy fluctuation from this person's body. However, she was the central figure of this group of people. Everyone listened to her orders. Moreover, this person seemed to have the ability to predict the future. During the battle, due to this person's ability to predict the future, I was at a disadvantage. If it wasn't for the fact that I was fighting with my life on the line, I'm afraid that I would have been in danger. That battle had almost consumed most of my lifespan. Chapter 1594. Tomb Robber has the ability to predict the future? Could it be that this person has a divination holy talisman? Xiao He pondered. If someone had the ability to predict the future, it could only guess that it had something to do with the divination holy talisman. The ability to predict the future was extremely rare. Moreover, predicting the future was a heaven-defying ability. The person who had this ability must have something to do with the divination holy talisman. I've told you everything I know. I think it's time for you to leave my territory, right? The cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave said coldly. He, of course. Xiao He spoke in an ambiguous manner. Immediately, the surrounding dragon figures rushed out like a monstrous tsunami and instantly wrapped around the ice coffin. The cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave did not expect Xiao He to suddenly attack. For a moment, she fell into Xiao He's trap. Great Nether Saint Dragon, you've gone too far. A furious voice rang out. Then, the dragon shadows that surrounded the ice coffin instantly shattered. The cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave, who had been lying in the ice coffin, suddenly opened it. She stepped into the air and shot towards the giant coffin like an arrow. The cave master of the Snow Lotus Grotto was worthy of being an expert at the earthly immortal realm when he was alive. At this moment, the might he erupted with caused even Zhuo Wen, who was watching from afar, to tremble in fear. This was a natural reaction when facing an expert. The cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave stretched out her hand. A cold wind blew. The cold air in the entire area transformed into a giant hand that covered the sky and slammed onto the great nether dragon coffin. Boom! The great nether dragon coffin was directly sent flying by the giant hand. Since Yun was connected to Xiao He, he could clearly hear Xiao He's muffled groan. Obviously, this palm had caused quite a lot of damage to it. Xiao He snorted coldly. Then, he took the great nether dragon coffin and turned into a ray of black light and disappeared. You want to run after hitting me? Not so fast. The cave master of the Snow Lotus Grotto gnashed her teeth. She wished for nothing more than to pull out Xiao He's tendons and peel off her bones. With a single step, she directly chased after the supreme nether dragon coffin. As the Snow Lotus Cave Master had almost lost her mind, she did not understand why the great abyss holy dragon had not come out of the coffin to fight her. After all, being in the coffin greatly restricted one's strength. This was also the reason why the Snow Lotus Cave Master had opened the coffin to pursue the great abyss holy dragon. Of course, opening the coffin once would greatly affect one's lifespan. If the Snow Lotus Cave's cave master wasn't flustered and exasperated, she wouldn't have chosen to open the coffin. After Xiao He and the cave master of the Snow Lotus Grotto fled into the distance, a black shadow suddenly shot out from an inconspicuous and gloomy place. This black shadow was extremely swift, and its target was clear as it flashed towards the ice coffin. Rumble! However, when the black figure reached out his hand and touched the ice coffin, a gust of cold air flowed up his arm and into his body like maggots in a tarsal bone. A mere ice coffin dares to show off? The black figure snorted coldly. His right eye turned icy blue while his left eye turned fiery red. The two colors merged together, and the dark cold poison and 9 flames karmic fire were also released by the black figure. They merged into a huge palace of ice and fire in the air. The palace of ice and fire suddenly pressed down. Although the ice coffin tried its best to resist, it was only an inanimate object. Soon, the palace of ice and fire completely suppressed it. After doing all this, the black figure waved his right hand, and the palace of ice and fire shrank to the size of a palm before it flew into his palm. Let's go! After keeping the palace of ice and fire, the black figure swiftly left the place at lightning speed. Not long after the black figure left, the Snow Lotus Cave Master returned with a gloomy expression. The Great Abyss Holy Dragon was just too slippery. Although she had almost beaten the Great Abyss Dragon Coffin to a pulp, the Great Abyss Holy Dragon still managed to escape in the end. Don't let me see you again. If I find out that you've returned to the Dead Swamp, I'll make a clean break with you even if I have to sacrifice the lifespan that I've accumulated over the years. The Snow Lotus Cave Master gritted her teeth as she flew to the frozen land at lightning speed. However, when she arrived at the frozen land, she was completely stunned. This was because the ice coffin that originally contained her body was nowhere to be found. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The Snow Lotus Cave Master refused to believe it. She kept searching in the frozen land, and when she finally confirmed that her ice coffin was missing, she fell silent. This silence lasted for a long time before she almost roared, "Great Abyss Holy Dragon, I'll never forgive you." This voice was extremely distant, and it almost spread across the entire serene corpse extremity. In a rather barren valley, a black figure carrying an ice coffin naturally heard the roar. His body involuntarily trembled, and his speed increased. I didn't expect the Snow Lotus Cave Master to return so quickly. I wonder how Xiao Hei is doing? This black figure was none other than Zhuan. He had taken advantage of the time when the Snow Lotus Cave Master was chasing after Xiao Hei to retrieve the ice coffin. This was the plan that Xiao Hei had told him earlier, and he had indeed successfully executed it. However, Zhuan was currently worried about Xiao Hei's situation. Although the Supreme Nether Dragon coffin contained the pressure left behind by Xiao Hei when he was at his peak, the seal had been broken by someone before. Given Xiao Hei's current state, it would be difficult for him to face the Snow Lotus Cave Master. Swoosh! Just as Zhuan thought of this, a sonic boom suddenly sounded from the other side of the valley, alerting Zhuan. However, when Zhuan discovered the source of the sonic boom, the alertness on his face gradually receded. This was because the object flying towards him was the Supreme Nether Dragon coffin. However, the surface of the Supreme Nether Dragon coffin was currently covered in cracks, and it was completely dim. It looked like an old man in his twilight years. When the Supreme Nether Dragon coffin arrived in front of Zhuan, the huge coffin completely shattered. A black figure flew out and landed on Zhuan's shoulder. "Xiao Hei, are you all right?" Zhuan looked at the exhausted Xiao Hei on his shoulder with a sliver of surprise in his eyes. He could not help but ask. Xiao Hei waved his hand and said, "That bitch is really serious. She actually kept chasing me. If it wasn't for the fact that I'm not in good condition right now, I would have beaten her up long ago. How could I allow her to be so arrogant?" As he spoke, Xiao Hei's gaze landed on the ice coffin on Zhuan's back. He laughed gloatingly. "However, it's a good thing that you took back that bitch's ice coffin. This Dragon Lord's efforts were not in vain. This time, I'm going to anger that bitch to death. Since you've obtained the ice coffin, it's time to go back, right?" Zhuan asked. "Yes, you're right. It's time to go back. However, what's infuriating is that this Dragon Lord's dragon corpse was stolen by someone. It's really infuriating." Thinking of the empty Supreme Nether Dragon coffin, Xiao Hei's expression became a little ugly. His dragon body was inside, and it was stolen just like that. Xiao Hei was flustered and exasperated. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, an extremely violent rumbling sound faintly came from the ground. Following that, an intense battle could be heard in the distance. What's going on? There seems to be a battle ahead. Zhuan narrowed his eyes and stared ahead. That seemed to be where the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave was. Could it be that the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave had discovered that the ice coffin was missing and went crazy? That's the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave? Zhuan raised his head and immediately saw an ice-cold lady in a snow-white dress hovering in the sky. Her eyes were still closed as if she was in a deep sleep. The instant the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave was hovering in the sky, several black figures with terrifying auras suddenly rushed out from below. The cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave was immediately surrounded by these black figures with terrifying auras. There were a total of 9 people in this group. Each of them had a terrifying aura, giving Zhuan an extremely dangerous feeling. Something worthy of mentioning was that the leader of the 9 people was a gray-robed old man with a withered figure. His gaze was sharp like a hawk's as he stared coldly at the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave, and it actually caused the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave to reveal a fearful expression. This gray-robed old man isn't simple. His aura is even more exuberant than the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave. He's an old monster at the earthly immortal saint stage. Moreover, the 8 cultivators following by this old man's side are all saints at the heaven-defying saint stage. Xiao He stood on Zhuowen's shoulder, and its gaze had become extremely heavy. An earthly immortal saint stage and 8 saints at the heaven-defying saint stage. Isn't this lineup too terrifying? Could it be that these 9 people are also dead people that were buried in the Nether Corpse Extremis? Zhuowen spoke with extreme surprise. No, they're all living people. Moreover, they ought to be living people that came in from the outside world. I just don't know exactly why they've come in. Xiao He shook its head. Zhuan had really never seen an earthly immortal saint stage expert. Now, this gray-robed old man that gave him extreme pressure from afar was an earthly immortal realm expert, and it was absolutely shocking to Zhuan. Moreover, this wasn't a dead person from the Nether Corpse Extremis, but a living person with exuberant vital energy and blood. Zhuan licked his slightly dry lips and said to Xiao He, should we approach and observe the situation now? At this moment, a wisp of burning desire surged out from Zhuowen's eyes. The person before him was an earthly immortal realm expert, and he'd never seen such an expert. If he was able to observe the battle between such experts, then it could be said to be extremely beneficial to him, and it might even be helpful to his advancement into the immortal saint stage in the future. Xiao He glanced at Zhuan. How could it not know what Zhuan was thinking at this moment? After pondering for a moment, Xiao He said in a deep voice, "The earthly immortal realm expert is too powerful. If you don't conceal your presence well, then it'll be very easy for him to sense you. At that time, you'll really be in trouble." Zhuan's face fell at this point. He knew that since Xiao He had said that, then there was probably no hope. However, the Supreme Abyss Dragon Coffin can still be used. Stick the fragments of the coffin around you and conceal your presence completely. Perhaps you'll be able to avoid the detection of the earthly immortal realm expert, but you have to be careful. Xiao He changed the topic. Zhuowen's eyes shone brightly when he heard that. He hurriedly put away the ice coffin into his spirit ring and collected the fragments of the Supreme Abyss Dragon Coffin. Under Xiao He's guidance, he stuck them all around his body. At the same time, he used a concealment technique to deeply conceal his presence. Let's go! Chapter 1595. Prophet Clan. Behind a rock wall about 1,000 meters away from the frozen world, Zhuan stopped and completely concealed his aura. Through a crack, Zhuan looked at the 10 people facing each other in the frozen world. To be more precise, the 9 of them had completely surrounded the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave. However, the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave had an extremely gloomy expression on her face. "It's you again? You came here more than 1,000 years ago. Why are you here again today? What's the meaning of this?" The cave master of Snow Lotus Cave looked past the 9 people and finally stopped at a petite figure at the bottom. The petite figure was a lowly who looked to be about 12 years old. The lowly's eyes were closed and her aura was weak. She was like an ordinary person without any cultivation base. Behind the 12-year-old lowly stood a tall and straight middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's aura was also extremely powerful. Although it was not as powerful as the gray-robed old man, it was much more powerful than the 8 heaven-defying saint stage experts. Zhuan also looked at the lowly with a puzzled expression. The cave master of Snow Lotus Cave seemed to be more afraid of the lowly than the gray-robed old man. Could it be that the lowly who looked like an ordinary person was even more terrifying than the gray-robed old man? The lowly stood quietly on the spot and did not answer at all. Instead, the gray-robed old man said indifferently, "Cave master of Snow Lotus Cave from 30,000 years ago, our Prophet Clan has some matters that we need your cooperation with. We hope you can make a trip back to the Central Plains with us." The cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave's face immediately turned gloomy. She looked around and said coldly, 1,000 years ago, you guys went to the dead swamp and were refused entry. Now you're targeting me? Do you think I'm easier to bully than that shameless snake? This bitch, how dare she call me a shameless snake? How hateful! Xiao Hei's indignant voice suddenly sounded in the sea of consciousness. Are you talking about the great nether saint dragon in the dead swamp? We didn't get the cold shoulder. The only thing left of the great abyss holy dragon was a collapsed dragon corpse. Even its soul is gone. I'm afraid the burial failed, causing its soul to collapse. The gray-robed elder shook his head. When they first entered the dead swamp, they thought that it would take some effort to get rid of the great nether holy dragon, but they didn't expect that there would only be an empty dragon corpse inside. It was just that the seal of the great nether dragon coffin took some effort. What? That shameless snake only great nether saint dragon corpse? You're lying, right? Didn't I see that shameless snake provoking me with the supreme nether dragon coffin? The cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave snorted coldly. The gray-robed elder shook his head. He did not wish to waste his breath with the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave. He continued, I don't wish to waste my breath with you. I believe that with our current lineup and your current condition, it is impossible to stop them. Even if you do your best to resist, I'm afraid that it will be useless. At that time, you will only waste the lifespan that you have accumulated with great difficulty. Is the Lord Master. You have no other choice. The gray-robed old man said coldly. With a wave of his sleeve, the terrifying aura in his body erupted like a volcano that was ready to erupt. Under the aura, the surrounding space within a few thousand feet turned into a vacuum. Everything came to a standstill. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At the same time, the 8 heaven-defying Saint Realm martial artists joined forces. Various power of law accompanied by Saint energy burst out from their hands. The power of the 10 people gathered together and formed a huge net in the sky. It suddenly enveloped the cave master of Snow Lotus Cave. The cave master of Snow Lotus Cave snorted coldly. She stomped her foot and a terrifying snowstorm swept out from the void behind her. It was vast and mighty, forming several terrifying snowstorm giants. There were a total of 4 blizzard giants, and each of them was indomitable. The 4 blizzard giants punched out together, and the space exploded. The power of ice and snow spread out, and even the space seemed to be frozen. Rumble! 4 snow giants blasted out at the same time and smashed into the net formed by the Saint energy. Then, there was a terrifying explosion, and the space shook. The net was on the verge of collapse, as if it would collapse at any time. Swoosh! However, the gray-robed old man stepped into the void, and a skinny claw pressed down on the net. Instantly, terrifying celestial saint force gathered on the net. The originally shaky net suddenly became much more tenacious and terrifying. It covered the 4 berserk giants and pressed them down. The berserk giants even knelt on the ground as if they couldn't withstand the heavy pressure. The cave master of Snow Lotus Cave's face changed drastically. She pointed her jade-like hands at the 4 snowstorm giants. Rumble! The snowstorm giants roared and exploded one after another, forming a terrifying snowstorm. In an instant, the net that had become even more tenacious was shattered into pieces. The snowstorm became more and more terrifying. It swept across an area of a few hundred miles and affected the nearby tombs. Fortunately, the owners of the tombs were not ordinary people. Under the orders of the owners of the tombs, the soldiers guarding the tombs used their superpowers to block the aftermath of the snowstorm. Thud, 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 thud. 8 heaven-defying stage saints groaned as they were pushed back by the violent snowstorm. They were pushed back by hundreds and thousands of steps. On the other hand, the gray-robed old man took dozens of steps back as he squinted his eyes. The cave master of Snow Lotus Cave is not simple. I guess she was one of the best in the earthly immortal realm when she was alive. Looking at the increasingly terrifying snowstorm, Vun was moved. This snowstorm was enough to tear an ordinary heavenly saint into pieces. Even with Zhuowen's phenomenal saint body, it would be difficult for him to face such a terrifying snowstorm. As the snowstorm became larger, the figure of the cave master of Snow Lotus Cave was completely submerged in it. It was impossible to see her figure clearly. Break through this snowstorm. He Lao, move 20 steps to the left, 100 steps forward, and 50 steps deeper. Use all your strength and the snowstorm will break by itself. A tender voice suddenly rang in the empty space. The owner of the voice was none other than the Lolita who was standing not far away. The strange thing was that the gray-robed old man cupped his hands respectfully at the Lolita. Then he followed the Lolita's instructions and moved 20 steps to the left, 100 steps forward, and entered the deepest part of the snowstorm. Fortunately, the gray-robed old man's strength was profound. The celestial saint power covered his body and blocked the powerful tearing force of the terrifying snowstorm. After about 10 breaths, the terrifying snowstorm suddenly came to a stop. Soon after, the snowstorm, which had been constantly spreading, finally stopped spreading and collapsed. With a muffled groan, the cave master of Snow Lotus Cave flew out in a sorry state. The 8 of you will form an octagonal formation and stand in 8 directions around the cave master of Snow Lotus Cave. Intercept her from the left front. She's at her weakest now. Use your strengths to attack her weaknesses. The Lolita spoke again. The 8 saints of the heaven-defying saint stage did not object. They dashed out and transformed into 8 figures. They formed an octagonal formation and intercepted the cave master of Snow Lotus Cave from the left front. Just like what the Lolita had said, the cave master of Snow Lotus Cave was indeed at her weakest now. She had not recovered from the snowstorm yet. Unexpectedly, the 8 of them took advantage of this opportunity. He Lao, take out the immortal binding rope. Be quick. The Loli spoke again. The gray-robed elder did not dare to be negligent. He took out an ordinary-looking rope from his spirit ring. However, the moment the rope was thrown out by the gray-robed elder like a snake, countless shadows of the rope filled the sky, forming thousands of shadows. The cave master of Snow Lotus Cave spat out a mouthful of blood. Before she could even react, she was tightly bound by the immortal binding rope and could not move at all. What's the origin of this group of people? They actually captured the cave master of Snow Lotus Cave so easily. Also, what's the origin of that little girl? She actually saw through the flaw of the snowstorm cast by the cave master of Snow Lotus Cave with just a glance. Looking at this scene, Yun was shocked. He knew clearly how powerful the cave master of Snow Lotus Cave was and how terrifying the snowstorm was. However, it was all destroyed under this little girl's guidance. Without a doubt, the little girl's guidance hit the nail on the head. Damn it. These people must be the group of people who took away my dragon corpse 1,000 years ago. In the sea of consciousness, Xiao He said with an extremely ugly expression. Previously, the gray-robed old man mentioned the Prophet clan. This group of people should be from that so-called Prophet clan. Isn't this Prophet clan one of the 9 great Saint Talisman clans in the central region? Moreover, it said that it's a great force that possesses the mysterious Prophet Saint Talisman. Jun narrowed his eyes. Although he had never set foot in the central region, his sea of consciousness was inherited from the Baifeng. The Baifeng came from the central region and had some understanding of the general situation in the central region. Jun understood that the Prophet clan was one of the 9 great Saint Talisman clans from the Baifeng's memories. Moreover, from the Baifeng's memories, the Prophet clan was much more mysterious than the other Saint Talisman clans. In particular, the Prophet clan had always been feared by other forces because of the Prophet Saint Talisman that they possessed. In the Prophet clan, there was a little girl who was conferred the title of goddess by the entire clan. It was said that this little girl could communicate with the Prophet Saint Talisman since she was young. From that, she could predict the future. She knew astronomy, geography, ancient and modern. Moreover, it was said that ever since the goddess came into contact with the Prophet Saint Talisman, her body stopped developing and she remained in the state of a little girl. Other than that, the goddess had also paid the price of being blinded. However, her divination abilities were renowned throughout the entire Middle Earth, attracting many powerful beings from other major powers who wanted to do something. They would all ask this little girl to divine their fortunes. However, the goddess of the Prophet clan was extremely arrogant. Her divination depended entirely on her mood. If she was in a bad mood, even if an old monster of the celestial sage level came to beg for mercy, she would not pay any attention to him. Chapter 1596. Prediction Saint Talisman. Prediction Saint Talisman? It's the most mysterious saint talisman among the 9 great saint talismans. It's said that this saint talisman allows its owner to understand the past and present, predict the future, and predict the future. It's an extremely terrifying saint talisman, Xiao He said solemnly. Just think about it, how heaven-defying was it to be able to predict the future and predict the future? With this ability, one could completely seek fortune and avoid calamity. It was even to the extent that one could predict the opponent's flaw in advance during a battle and defeat a strong enemy in one fell swoop. This was also why this little girl was able to see through the flaw of the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave with a glance during the battle earlier and helped He Lao and the 8 heaven-defying stage saints to quickly capture the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave. If it wasn't for the little girl's reminder, even He Lao and the 8 heaven-defying stage saints would have to spend more effort to capture the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave. After He Lao captured the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave, he stepped on the void and swept to the front of the little girl. He said respectfully, "Lady Goddess, how should we deal with this person? Bring her back to the clan. I have my own uses for her." I don't know why the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave actually came out of her tomb. This allowed us to take advantage of the loophole and capture her. Yen Tianwei closed her eyes. Her expression was calm like water, but there was a trace of doubt in her tone. These 2 masters usually hid in the depths of their tombs and rarely came out. If the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave sealed herself in the depths of her tomb, it would be difficult for Yen Tianwei to get her out even if she had the ability to predict the future. However, they encountered the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave not long after they arrived here. Naturally, Yen Tianwei wouldn't let her go easily. The tomb guards of the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave have been destroyed, and even her coffin is gone. Could it be that it was stolen? He Lao's eyes flickered as he spoke with surprise. Yen Tianwei didn't say anything. Her eyelids were trembling while her right thumb was moving rapidly on the other 4 fingers. She looked like an old man who did fortune-telling on the streets. Her appearance was rather comical. However, He Lao and the rest did not reveal any smiles. Instead, they revealed a solemn expression. They knew that Yen Tianwei was communicating with the divination Saint Talisman every time this happened. He was beginning to divine about the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave. Following the continuous movement of Yen Tianwei's fingers, Zhuowen, who was hiding in the shadows, acutely sensed that a gray seal had faintly appeared between Yen Tianwei's brows. This gray symbol was very dim, but the aura it gave off was like the might of the heavens. Zhuowen took a look at it, and his entire body involuntarily trembled. Subsequently, he did not dare to take a second look. That's a strand of the divination Saint Talisman. This girl really is impressive. She can actually communicate with the divination Saint Talisman and use a strand of its power. Xiao He couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Xiao He knew much more about the 9 great saint symbols than Zhuowen did. The divination Saint Talisman was the most mysterious one among the 9 great saint symbols. It could connect the past to the present, to the past, to the future, to know life and death, and to predict good or bad luck. It could be said that the cultivator who possessed the divination Saint Talisman could completely know the danger in advance and avoid it in advance. The expert who possessed the divination Saint Talisman was far more difficult to deal with than the other 8 great saint symbols. Although the divination Saint Talisman was mysterious and powerful, its threshold was much higher than the other saint talismans. It was already very difficult for ordinary people to communicate with the divination Saint Talisman, let alone master it. Although the Prophet clan possessed the complete divination Saint Talisman, there had never been anyone who could master the divination Saint Talisman in the Prophet clan for thousands of years. However, Yen Tianwei was the only clansman who could communicate with the divination Saint Talisman in the Prophet clan for thousands of years. Moreover, she could use a portion of the divination Saint Talisman's power. It was precisely because Yen Tianwei could communicate with the divination Saint Talisman that her status in the Prophet clan was extremely high, even though her cultivation was mediocre or even immortal. Many higher-ups of the clan were respectful and reverent to her. This was also the reason why He Lao, who was an earthly immortal, had to be so humble and respectful to this little girl in front of him. After all, this little girl was the only one who could communicate with the divination Saint Talisman in the Prophet clan for thousands of years. Such an existence was even rarer than a celestial sage. How could their clan not value her? After about 20 breaths of time, Yen Tianwei stopped divining with her finger. She kept silent for a moment and said indifferently, "Just like what you said, He Lao. The coffin of the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave was indeed stolen." So it was really stolen? However, who is so capable to actually force the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave to walk out of the tomb and even move the coffin away? He Lao's eyes were filled with surprise. In his opinion, if the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave didn't step out of the coffin voluntarily, even he would have a hard time separating the ice coffin from the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave. After all, the ice coffin of the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave was built 30,000 years ago by many almighty figures of the Snow Lotus Cave with a lot of resources. Its degree of toughness was far beyond his imagination. Even He Lao, who was an earthly immortal, might not be able to shatter the ice coffin of the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave. He might not even be able to affect the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave who was inside the ice coffin. However, someone did it. He Lao couldn't help but ponder about the identity of the person who stole the ice coffin. That person is not far away from us. Yen Tianwei's tender and indifferent voice sounded again. Subsequently, her eyes slowly turned around and finally fell on the rock wall where Zhuan was. Zhuan looked through the gap and coincidentally met Yen Tianwei's eyes. Although Yen Tianwei's eyes were tightly closed, Zhuan had an illusion that he was being stared at by Yen Tianwei. This illusion was inexplicable, but it was very strong for Zhuan. Have I been discovered? A bad feeling rose in Zhuo Wen's heart. When Yen Tianwei looked in his direction, Zhuo Wen was extremely flustered. In particular, Yen Tianwei's final words caused the ominous feeling in Zhuo Wen's heart to grow even more intense. Yen Tianwei's behavior naturally attracted the attention of He Lao and the others. They didn't expect that there was someone hiding in the vicinity, but they didn't notice it before. Especially He Lao, whose face was slightly gloomy. Even he didn't notice it before. He was afraid that this hidden person wasn't simple. "Are you still not coming out?" Yen Tianwei's indifferent voice sounded. Instantly, Zhuan, who was hiding behind the rock wall, had goosebumps. He knew that he had been discovered. Without hesitation, Zhuan executed his movement technique and fled toward the exit of the Serene Corpse Extremis. A little guy at the shattering profound Saint Realm? When Zhuowen's fleeing figure appeared in front of everyone, He Lao's eyes were like torches as he focused on Zhuan. He was shocked to find that Zhuowen's aura was actually very weak. He was only at the shattering profound Saint Realm, and he hadn't even reached the Heaven Saint Realm. "Zhaoku, go and capture this guy." Originally, He Lao intended to chase after Zhuan. After all, in his opinion, this hidden person was definitely not ordinary if he could hide from his perception. But now, the aura of the shattering profound Saint Realm on this person's body made He Lao completely lose interest in this person, and he was too lazy to chase after him. Zhaoku was a tall man, and he was one of the 8 heaven-defying Saint Realm experts. He licked his lips and immediately agreed. Immediately, he shot out like an arrow that had left the bow in the direction that Zhuowen had fled. His speed was so fast that it almost caused an intense and sharp whistling sound to rise in the air. "Goddess, the one who stole the ice coffin of the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave shouldn't be this person, right?" He Lao walked to Yen Tianwei's side and said in a self-deprecating manner. Yen Tianwei frowned slightly and shook her head. The result of the divination just now is that the one who stole the ice coffin of the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave is this person. However, this person's cultivation is really too low. This, He Lao revealed an embarrassed expression. In fact, what he wanted to say was how this person's cultivation level was so low. How did he manage to steal the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cavern? This person might have been killed by the tomb guards before he even got close to the cave master's tomb. Could Yen Tianwei's divination be wrong? Of course, he couldn't question the result of Yen Tianwei's divination. After all, questioning the goddess was the same as questioning the divination's saint talisman. This was a great taboo in the clan. Maybe I should divine this person's past and future. It might be more accurate. Perhaps Yen Tianwei was also a little doubtful about the result of her divination. After all, the strength of the shattering profound saint realm was too low. It was almost impossible to steal the coffin from the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave by relying on his own strength. Of course, if they knew that Xiao He was involved in this matter, they might not be so surprised. Speaking up to here, Yen Tianwei's right hand moved continuously, and the gray mark between her brows appeared again. At this moment, she started to divine Zhuowen's past and future. In 5 breaths of time, Yen Tianwei's face became extremely red. She suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and took a few steps back. Her aura was weak. "Goddess, what happened to you? Are you all right?" He Lao hurriedly went forward and supported Yen Tianwei, who was retreating. He stared at the latter with concern. He didn't expect Yen Tianwei to be in such a situation. Yen Tianwei waved her hand and said, "I'm fine." "What happened just now? Goddess, why did you suddenly spit out blood? Could it be that there is something wrong with that person?" He Lao placed his right palm on Yen Tianwei's shoulder and transmitted a gentle energy into her. Her originally unsightly expression instantly recovered a lot. "There is something wrong, and it's a big problem. In my divination, this person's past and future are actually gloomy. I can't see through it at all. Originally, when I wanted to communicate with the divination saint talisman to further divine this person's matters, I was actually rejected by the divination's saint talisman. Moreover, I was injured by the backlash." Speaking up to here, Yen Tianwei's face darkened. There was even a trace of horror in her eyes. This was the first time she had encountered such a backlash from the divination's saint talisman. At the same time, she also knew that the divination saint talisman didn't have a problem with the saint talisman, but there was a problem with the target of her divination. Chapter 1597. Pursued swoosh, swoosh. In the sky above the serene corpse impasse, 2 figures were chasing each other like arrows leaving the bow. Zhuowen's face turned slightly pale when he felt the terrifying aura behind him getting closer and closer. He did not expect the little girl to discover him, even though he had hidden himself so well. That little girl is the divine lady of the Prophet clan. She has the ability to communicate with the divination's saint talisman. She can use divination to deduce your location. "It's not a problem for that divine lady," Blackie said in a deep voice. "I've miscalculated. If I knew the little girl had the ability to divine, I would have fled long ago instead of walking into a trap." Jun complained in his heart when he felt the murderous aura of the heaven-defying saint closing in on him. He regretted watching the battle of the Snow Lotus Cave Master out of curiosity. Although watching the battle of the earthly immortals gave him some inspiration, the feeling of being discovered and being chased was not too good compared to that. At this moment, Nguyen had already unleashed the Void Law and the Purple Lightning Wings. His speed had almost reached the fastest speed he had ever been in his life. Even so, he still could not shake off the heaven-defying saint behind him. At this moment, Zhaoku, who was chasing after him, was even more shocked than Jun. In his opinion, a fragmented profound saint was merely an ant-like existence. To him, he only needed a single palm to annihilate such an ant-like existence. However, he had already unleashed his fastest speed, but he still could not catch up with the little fragmented saint in front of him. To Zhaoku, this was an absolute humiliation. "You're really a little grasshopper that knows how to jump around. Let's see how long you can jump around for." Zhaoku snorted coldly. He stepped on the void with his right foot and shot out like an arrow leaving the bow. At the same time, he formed a seal with his right hand and slammed it on his chest. Instantly, a blazing light erupted from his body. Then, Zhaoku's speed skyrocketed. As his speed skyrocketed, The distance between Zhao Ku and Zhuowen continued to shorten. In the end, the distance between the two of them was only about 20 meters. They were almost touching each other. You're just a fragmented, profound saint. You're actually able to persist for so long. You're not bad at all. However, this is the end. Staring at the young man who was fleeing in front of him, Zhao Xueke was disdainful. He then stretched out his right hand and heaven-defying saint force burst out. Layers of saint force condensed in the void and formed a huge golden palm. Rumble! The golden palm descended from the sky like a massive mountain, rolling down. It was as though it wanted to annihilate Zhuowen entirely at this moment. How did this guy suddenly become so fast? Zhuowen also noticed Zhao Ku, who was only 20 meters behind him, and was shocked to the core. At this moment, he was still a few thousand meters away from the exit of the Serene Corpse extremity. To him, this distance could be covered in a few breaths. Unfortunately, Zhao Ku was already very close to him and had even launched such a terrifying attack at him. If he did not care, he would definitely be hit. As for the all-out attack of a heaven-defying stage saint, even if he had a saint physique, he would not be able to withstand it and would directly collapse. In desperation, Yuan waved his right hand and took out an ordinary-looking tile. He then injected his saint force into the tile. Suddenly, a blazing golden light burst out from the tile. The golden light soared into the sky and revealed a majestic shadow. This shadow suddenly punched out and heavily hit the golden palm. Rumble! An earth-shaking sound rang out. The golden palm directly exploded, and the majestic illusory figure staggered back a few hundred steps. The golden light on its body faintly dimmed. On the surface of the tile in Zhuowen's hand, traces of cracks appeared. This made Zhuowen's heart ache. He had used this heaven-defying saint treasure too many times. The saint connotation contained in it was much less than before. It was already very good that it could last until now. Let's go! The moment the majestic shadow collapsed the golden palm, Yuan did not stop. Like an arrow leaving the bow, he suddenly fled toward the exit. A heaven-defying saint was not someone he could compete with at the moment. Even if he used many of his trump cards, it was still impossible for him to be Zhao Ku's opponent. After all, the gap between the two of them was too big. A heaven-defying saint treasure? Zhao Ku stared at the majestic shadow in surprise. Obviously, he did not expect that the little guy in front of him, who was only at the mysterious shattering saint stage, would have a heaven-defying saint treasure. However, a mere heaven-defying saint treasure really can't stop me. Zhao Ku smiled coldly and waved his right hand. Unknowingly, a curved blade as thin as a cicada's wing appeared in his right palm. The surface of the curved blade was as transparent as a mirror. The scenery on the other side could be seen through the blade. Moreover, this curved blade was not simple. There was a faint golden light flowing on the blade as if there were golden stars hidden on the blade. Holding the curved blade, Zhao Ku moved in a mysterious trajectory and swept to the side of the majestic shadow in an instant. Then he stretched out his right hand and stabbed the curved blade at the shadow's chest at a tricky angle. The majestic shadow was connected with Zhuowen's mind. Seeing the curved blade sweeping over, the shadow stroked his right hand and suddenly blasted it. Then, the shadow caught the curved blade with one hand. Zhao Ku grinned. His smile was cruel and callous. With a wave of his right hand, the curved blade slashed out horizontally, and the palm of the illusory figure was cut in half. Slash! After the shadow's palm was cut, Zhao Ku's knife momentum changed again and again. Then, the curved blade slashed down from the top of the shadow's head at the speed of light. Suddenly, the shadow let out an extremely terrified howl and was directly cut in half. The moment the shadow was destroyed, the tile in Zhuowen's hand finally collapsed into countless fragments. Zhuowen's pupils shrunk to the size of needles. He did not expect that the heaven-defying saint treasure would be dealt with so easily. At this moment, Yuan was still 1,000 meters away from the seal. He only needed 3 breaths of time to reach the seal. At that time, he only needed to pass through the seal and it would be able to stop Zhao Ku. You can't escape. An indifferent and somewhat mocking voice slowly rang out from the distance. After Zhao Ke destroyed the phantasm, he stepped on the air and shot out like a bolt of lightning. Although he was still 1,000 meters behind Zhuo Wen, his curved blade was already slashing towards Zhuo Wen. Swoosh swoosh. Suddenly, a golden light streaked across the sky. Soon after, the curved blade turned into a terrifying blade light and instantly arrived behind Jun. This blade was enough to cut him in half. Spirit-devouring magma river, come out. Zhuan knew very well that the curved blade in Zhao Ke's hand was definitely a heaven-defying saint artifact. Therefore, he directly summoned the spirit-devouring magma river. After all, only a heaven-defying saint artifact could contend with a heaven-defying saint artifact. Even if Zhuan could not unleash the full power of the spirit-devouring magma river, he could at least block this heaven-defying saint artifact curved blade. Boom! The endless magma river burst out from Zhuowen's waist. In an instant, the temperature of the air became scorching hot. The magma river was like the world's most solid shield, blocking in front of Zhun. Bang! The blade light arrived in an instant and stood above the magma river, stirring up waves of magma. Although the blade light was indeed terrifying and constantly stirred the magma river, it did not completely break through the magma river's defense. Zhuan snorted and took a few steps back. He blocked the magma river so that the blade light could not get close. At the same time, he also suffered from the rebound force of the blade light. The rebound force was not simple. Even now, it still made Zhuowen's qi and blood boil. Hurry up and leave! Zhuowen roared angrily. His eyes of ice and fire suddenly opened. 9 flames, karmic fire and dark frost poison drilled out of his body at the same time. Under the control of his eyes of ice and fire, they formed a huge palace of ice and fire in the void. Rumble! The ice-fire palace was like a huge mountain as it came crashing down from the sky and smashed into the blade light. This caused the blade light, which had originally been wreaking havoc, to stop in its tracks. Taking advantage of this momentary pause, Zhuan did not hesitate. The Void Law and Purple Thunder Wings burst out at an unprecedented speed. He instantly disappeared from where he was and arrived at the seal's mouth. At this moment, the 9 golden runes at the seal's mouth were still releasing blazing golden light, like 9 small suns. Swoosh! Zhuan waved his right hand and took back the soul-devouring magma river. The soul-devouring magma river turned back into a belt and wrapped around Zhuowen's waist. It looked extremely inconspicuous. At the same time, the ice-fire palace completely collapsed under the attack of the blade light. However, the blade light also seemed dim and on the verge of collapse. In the end, it collapsed. Swoosh! Taking advantage of this short period of time, Zhao Ke successfully arrived. He first glanced at the seal's mouth behind Zhuowen and then looked at Zhuan. He was not in a hurry to capture Zhuan. In his opinion, Zhuan was at a dead end. He only needed to stretch out his hand to capture him. Therefore, he was not in a hurry. Tell me where you came from. Also, why are you sneaking around the Seer clan not far from the Seer clan? Zhao Ke looked at the young man in front of him with slight disdain. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He was not in a hurry. The seal's mouth was right in front of him. If he wanted to enter it, he could do so. You are indeed from the Seer clan. How did you enter the Seer clan? This was something that Zhuowen had been wondering about for a long time. The Prophet clan had once come to this forbidden ground 1,000 years ago. Could it be that there were other entrances to this forbidden ground in the Central Plains apart from the one he was at? Chapter 1598. Zhao Ke's death. Zhuowen was stunned. At the same time, he searched through the memories of the Baifeng's Sea of Consciousness. Immediately, the memories of the 4 battlefields flooded into the depths of his mind. Although Zhuan had inherited the Baifeng's Sea of Consciousness and retained all of the Baifeng's memories, the Baifeng had lived for much longer than Zhuan. The amount of memories in the Baifeng's Sea of Consciousness could be described as vast. If Zhuan wanted to take in all of these memories, his head would definitely not be able to handle it. He might even bleed from all of his orifices because of it. Therefore, Zhuan would only look through the memories stored in the Baifeng's Sea of Consciousness when he needed to know something. For example, the 4 battlefields that Zhao Ke mentioned this time. The 4 battlefields existed in the 4 borders of the Central Plains. These 4 battlefields were called the Great Een Battlefields, the Great Yang Battlefields, the Great Void Battlefields, and the Immemorial Battlefields. It was said that these 4 battlefields were established after the catastrophe 10,000 years ago. Moreover, from the Baifeng's memories, Jun faintly felt that the establishment of these 4 battlefields was inextricably linked to the catastrophe 10,000 years ago. Of course, the Baifeng's memories did not mention the specifics of the 4 battlefields. This was because the Baifeng had never entered the 4 battlefields. It did not know much about the situation inside. It only knew that the 4 battlefields were suddenly established after the catastrophe. The Nether Corps Extremis might be an extremely unfamiliar place in the 4 major regions, but many cultivators in the Central Plains knew about it. The 4 battlefields all had entrances to the Nether Corps Extremis. However, to enter the Nether Corps Extremis through the 4 battlefields, one had to pay a huge price to enter. This price was not something that ordinary cultivators could afford. Only some major forces could afford. I'm asking you a question. Why aren't you answering? Are you courting death? Zhao Ke's eyes were cold. He stepped forward step by step. The aura on his body was like a vast mountain that crushed toward Zhuowen, forcing Zhuowen to retreat step by step. Looking at Zhuowen's appearance, the disdain in Zhao Ke's eyes grew even stronger. He slowly walked forward and said indifferently, "A fragmentation saint ant like you, quickly kneel down and kowtow to me. Perhaps I will spare your life." Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and stared at Zhao Ke indifferently. He said, "You're just a heaven-defying saint stage expert. What right do you have to make me kowtow to you? I'll cultivate for as long as you do. If I cultivate for as long as you do, I'm afraid you won't even be qualified to carry my shoes." As soon as he said this, Zhao Ke stopped in his tracks. Then he glared at Zhuowen, his whole body trembling with anger. Good. You've successfully infuriated me. Today, you'll definitely die. I'll cut you into 8 pieces and make you live a life worse than death, roared Zhao Ke. You talk too much nonsense. If you want to kill me, then hurry up and kill me. You're just chattering like a woman. You're not straightforward at all, shrugged Zhuowen and said with a mocking smile. Zhuowen's words and his attitude instantly caused Zhao Ke to be angered to the point of spitting blood. A mere ant at the shattering profound saint realm actually dared to ridicule him in such an unbridled manner. This caused Zhao Ke to almost lose his mind. In the end, Zhao Ke only spat out the word die. Then, Zhao Ke was like a fierce tiger that had been released from its cage. He swooped down and launched a terrifying attack. The curved blade that was as thin as a cicada's wing was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. It instantly swept toward Zhuowen's throat. Zhuowen's eyelids twitched. Zhao Ke's attack gave him too much pressure. It was like a huge mountain crushing down on his back, causing Zhuowen's expression to change drastically. Swoosh. However, Zhuowen did not intend to clash head-on with Zhao Ke. He immediately summoned the 3 golden runes in his body. After which, he took a step forward and directly entered the powerful seal formed by the 9 revolution golden split runes. In an instant he disappeared. Rumble. The curved blade arrived in an instant. Unfortunately, it was still a step slower than Zhuowen. In the end, it slammed into the seal. Clang. The 9 golden split runes on the seal erupted with a blazing and dazzling golden light. Then, the curved blade that was slashing towards him flew backwards with a clang. In the end, it was stuck in the ground and did not move anymore. What? That little bastard passed through the seal? Zhao Ke's body trembled. He took a step forward and rushed to the side of the curved blade that was stuck in the ground. He pulled it out with a face full of disbelief. What the hell is going on? Zhao Ke came to the entrance of the seal with doubts in his heart. His right hand reached into the 9 golden split runes at the entrance of the seal. He immediately felt a terrifying sense of danger. This sense of danger was like a maggot that rushed straight to his head, causing his body to involuntarily tremble. Retreat. Zhao Ke's senses were quite sharp. However, the moment this sense of danger rushed to his head, he continuously retreated. His speed soared to the limit. However, it was too late. His saber had struck the 9 cycles golden splitting rune and caused the 9 cycles golden splitting rune to rebound. Swoosh! 9 dazzling golden runes suddenly peeled off from the seal. They split into 9 different directions and rushed towards Zhaoku. Damn it! What exactly is this seal? It can actually rebound. Zhaoku's expression was ugly. He twisted his right hand and grabbed the hilt of the curved blade. Soon after, he abruptly made a circle around his waist. The curved blade light shot out and turned into an arc that spread in all directions. Clang, clang, clang. The arc-shaped blade light shot out in all directions and ruthlessly landed on the 9 golden runes. Soon after, sparks shot out like a sky full of stars. The sparks were like a meteor shower that constantly scattered in the air. The scene that they formed was extremely gorgeous. However, Zhaoku was not in the mood to pay attention to such a scene. His expression was very ugly at this moment because he realized that the arc-shaped blade light that the curved blade had scattered had been completely annihilated by the 9 golden runes. As for the 9 golden runes, they were like soldiers with great tacit understanding as they surrounded Zhaoku. It was as if they wanted to completely crush Zhaoku to death. Clang, clang, clang. A trace of ruthlessness flashed in Zhaoku's eyes. He pinched out a sword finger with his right hand and suddenly pointed it at his chest. Soon after, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood on the curved blade. Suddenly, the surface of the curved blade revealed a bright blood-red color and a faint fishy smell was faintly emitted from the curved blade. Instant slash. Zhaoku held the curved blade and quickly slashed out 9 times in the void. 9 rays of golden blade light that were wrapped in a blood-red color burst out. Each of the 9 rays of blade light was many times stronger than the one that Zhaoku had scattered before. Each of the 9 rays of blade light seemed to be able to crush the world and explode the void. However, the moment the 9 rays of blade light swept over the 9 golden runes, Zhaoku originally thought that the greatly increased power of the blade light this time would be able to resist the 9 golden runes. He did not expect that the moment the 9 rays of blade light touched the golden runes, they would collapse inch by inch. As the blade light collapsed, the 9 golden runes were very close and instantly fell on 9 positions around Zhaoku. Zhaoku used all of his skills and countless trump cards, but he was unable to stop the 9 golden runes from approaching. In the end, he was completely submerged by the 9 golden runes, leaving only a miserable cry. When the 9 golden runes returned to their positions, Zhaoku's figure completely disappeared. Under the power of the 9 revolution golden split runes, not even his bones were left. Even the heaven-defying curved blade on his body was annihilated and disappeared. On the other side of the seal, Zhuan quietly stared at Zhaoku, who had been blasted to pieces by the 9 golden runes. He was extremely moved. He also did not expect the 9 revolution golden split runes to be so terrifying that Zhaoku, who was at the heaven-defying saint stage, did not even have the chance to escape. Just how powerful is the first mountain god? Just the seal set up by the 9 revolution golden split runes was able to kill a heaven-defying saint stage expert. Zhuan murmured softly, but there was a hint of emotion in his eyes. The power that the 9 revolution golden split runes had erupted was truly beyond his expectations. I can't see through the first mountain god either, but I know that the first mountain god probably has no intention of harming you. However, one must always be wary of others. It's better for you to pay more attention to the first mountain god, Xiaohe said after some thought. Zhuan nodded. Xiaohe was right. The first mountain god was indeed mysterious. Moreover, he always felt that the first mountain god had a lot of secrets. Although the first mountain god indeed had no reason to harm him, he still had to be careful. Let's go quickly. This person's death should be known by the prophet family very soon. Moreover, this Master Dragon also knows that this Master Dragon's dragon corpse was snatched by the prophet family. This Master Dragon will definitely settle this debt in the future. Blackie said. Zhuan didn't intend to stay here for too long when he heard this. He took a step out and flashed out explosively like an arrow that left the bow, instantly leaving the cave and the ravine before flashing towards the southern barbaric lands. Not long after Zhuan left, He Lao, who was still in the Serene Corpse impasse, had a drastic change of expression as he said, "Zhao Ke's life tablet has shattered." What? Could it be that Zhao Ke is dead? It's impossible. Zhao Ke is at the heaven-defying saint stage. How could he die so easily? The rest of the Prophet clan were also shocked. They could not believe such a fact. Who killed him? Could it be that Zhao Ke provoked a tomb owner with terrifying strength in the Serene Corpse impasse and was chased to death by that tomb owner? He Lao frowned and looked at Yen Tianwei. He knew that Yen Tianwei had the ability to predict the future and could definitely divine the cause of Zhao Ke's death. Not only He Lao, but the other saints of the Prophet clan were also looking at Yen Tianwei as if they were consulting her. Yen Tianwei was not in a hurry. She stretched out her right hand again and began to make a divination gesture. After a while, Yen Tianwei's delicate body trembled slightly as she said, "Zhao Ke was not killed by a powerful tomb owner." Sacred Lady, then how did Zhao Ke die? Could it be that he was killed by a puny shattering profound saint stage expert? Speaking of this, He Lao could not help but laugh. Obviously, he felt that this was a big joke. How could a shattering profound saint stage expert kill a heaven-defying saint stage expert? Not only He Lao, but the others also shook their heads and laughed. Obviously, He Lao's speculation was not reliable. You're right. Zhao Ke's death is indeed related to that person. As for the specific cause of his death, I am unable to divine it, Yen Tianwei said seriously. Chapter 1599. Ice Coffin, Goddess. Do you mean that Zhao Ke was really killed by that shattering profound saint brat? He Lao asked with a trace of uncertainty. It was unbelievable that a shattering profound saint could kill a heaven-defying saint realm martial artist. It was almost beyond He Lao's imagination. The rest of the Prophet clan also looked incredulous. Yen Tianwei shook her head slightly and said, "I only said that Zhao Ke's death was related to that person, but he wasn't killed by that person. I'm afraid it's impossible for a shattering profound saint realm martial artist to kill a heaven-defying saint realm martial artist even in the central region. I'm afraid that even the #1 prodigy of the Chaos Temple, Yuan Hongwen, who was known as the god descending from the sky, was only comparable to an ordinary heaven-defying saint realm martial artist when he was at the shattering profound saint realm. It's almost impossible for him to kill a heaven-defying saint realm martial artist." Speaking of this, He Lao and the others heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, they were puzzled as to how Zhao Ke died. Let's go and take a look. Zhao Ke died not far from here. As Yen Tianwei spoke, she led everyone in the direction where Zhao Ke and Zhuowen had gone. After a few hours, Yen Tianwei and the others arrived at the mouth of the seal formed by the 9 revolution golden split patterns. He Lao landed near the mouth of the seal and looked around with his sharp eyes. He said, "Zhao Ke's traces disappeared here, and there are traces of a great battle here." Yen Tianwei moved her fingers and said indifferently, "Zhao Ke died here, and from the result of my divination, Zhao Ke should have died under the 9 golden patterns on the seal. As for that person, he seemed to have passed through the seal and left." Speaking of this, Yen Tianwei's tone became a little uncertain. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that the seal in front of them was not weak at all. How did that shattering profound saint realm brat pass through the seal? This seal is strange. Let me have a try. He Lao's eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. He took a step forward and leaped up like a rock spreading its wings. He reached the seal in an instant. His right hand formed a claw, and a surge of celestial saint force gushed out and turned into a giant claw. He slammed it on the mouth of the seal. Rumble! When the giant claw blasted on the seal, the 9 golden patterns on the seal burst out with extremely horrifying golden light. Subsequently, the 9 golden patterns broke free from the seal and rushed at He Lao from 9 different directions. He Lao's figure was like an eagle. His hands formed into claws and waved in the void like a vigorous eagle. The sharp claws formed by the celestial saint force were extremely hard and could penetrate gold and split rocks. Clang, clang, clang. However, the moment He Lao made contact with the 9 golden patterns, he let out a muffled groan. The sharp claws formed by the celestial saint force were actually broken, and the 9 golden patterns were repelled for the first time. He Lao took dozens of steps back, but the 9 golden patterns didn't pursue him. Instead, they returned to the mouth of the seal and combined into 9 glittering golden patterns. This seal is not simple. He Lao stopped and panted as he stared at the seal with an extremely fearful gaze. It seems like Zhao Ku was killed by the rebound force of this seal. The power of the 9 golden patterns on the seal is extremely vast. Even He Lao was put in such a difficult situation by it. It should be more than enough to kill Zhao Ku. Yen Tianwei analyzed calmly. Everyone was enlightened, but He Lao frowned slightly and said, "This seal is so terrifying. How did that puny shattering profound Saint Realm expert pass through it?" Yen Tianwei's eyelids moved slightly as he said in a deep voice, "If I'm not wrong, this person didn't enter the Nether Corpse Extremis from the passageway of the 4 battlefields, but from the mouth of this seal. The sealing power of this mouth of the seal is very powerful. The person who set up this seal is at least an existence of the celestial Saint Realm, and his strength is above He Lao's. As for the man at the shattering profound Saint Realm, he probably knew about the loophole of this seal and used it to enter and exit the Nether Corpse Extremis freely." At this moment, Yen Tianwei's face was full of wisdom. He finally inferred the most reasonable conclusion from many clues. Of course, it was indeed the conclusion closest to the truth. Zhuan did use the loophole of this seal, and this loophole was the 9-turn golden crack pattern on Zhuan's body that came from the same source as the seal. If it weren't for this loophole, Zhuan might not have been able to escape from Zhao Ku's pursuit back then. "Sacred Lady, are we just going to let it go like this? Zhao Ku died because of this person?" someone said indignantly. Yen Tianwei shook her head slightly and said indifferently, "This person isn't from the central continent. With our current strength, we can't break this seal at all. Looking for this person is undoubtedly like looking for a needle in a haystack. Are we just going to let it go like this?" someone said unwillingly. "Let's go back first. According to my divination, this person will set foot on the central continent in the future. Perhaps we will meet this person in the central continent. At that time, it's still not too late to settle the score with him," Yen Tianwei said indifferently. "Since the Sacred Lady has said so, let's put this matter aside first. Isn't the Sacred Lady's purpose of entering the Netherworld Corpse ground this time is to find 3 dead people at the earthly immortal realm? Now that we have the corpse of the cave master of the Snow Lotus Cave, we have to find the other 2 as soon as possible." After He Lao spoke, everyone who was originally unwillingly gave up. He Lao was an earthly immortal and had a high prestige among everyone. Since he had spoken, everyone naturally had no objections. However, before leaving, the Sacred Lady looked back at the seal behind her. Her tightly closed eyelids twitched slightly, and she muttered in a voice that only she could hear, "What is the origin of that person? His past and future are completely unknown. Even the divination Saint Talisman refused to provide any information about this person. This is the first time I have encountered such a person." Half a month later, near the southern barbarians' burning sky city, Zhuan followed the senses of the Azure Dragon Palace and found a miniature version of the Azure Dragon Palace hidden in a dense forest. Due to the matter of the Icefire family, the people of the Azure Dragon Palace could be said to be cautious. They did not dare to bring Ryuka to the table so quickly. After confirming his identity, Zhuan entered the Azure Dragon Square. After Zhuan entered, the higher-ups of Ryuka gathered one after another. They were all relieved that Zhuan could return safely. There was no doubt that Zhuan had become their spiritual pillar at this moment. If Zhuan collapsed, they really did not know if Ryuka could hold on. After greeting the higher-ups of Ryuka, his parents, Lu Hantian, and a group of close friends, Zhuan winked at Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao. As a result, the 3 of them entered one of the pavilions. Feng Xiao asked with concern, "Zhuan, what did you go out to do before?" "I wanted to bring Chen Shui with me. Moreover, the demon sealing green coffin is not sturdy and Chen Shui's soul is extremely weak, so it is very easy to be affected. So in order to prevent this from happening, I brought this thing over." After saying this, Zhuan took out a large ice coffin from his spirit ring and placed it in front of him. The ice coffin was crystal clear, as if it was carved out of a giant block of ice. The cold air that escaped from the surface of the ice coffin caused Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao to involuntarily shiver. This cold air not only affected their bodies, it also affected the depths of their souls. In front of this cold air, it was as if their souls could freeze at any moment. Feng Xiao and Long Xiaotian both took a few steps back and asked in shock, "Tian, where did you get this ice coffin from? The cold air that escapes from the surface is truly terrifying." "I got it from a dangerous place." "That's right, mother. Where is the demon sealing green coffin now?" Zhuan vaguely explained. It was not convenient for him to reveal too much about the matter of the Nether Corp's danger ground. Feng Xiao replied, then with a flick of her finger, she took out the demon sealing green coffin. Zhuan gently opened the lid of the demon sealing green coffin, then stared at the beautiful woman who was quietly sleeping in the coffin with a gentle gaze. Zhuan slowly carried Mu Chenxue out and carefully placed her in the ice coffin. Finally, he closed the lid and placed the ice coffin in his spirit ring. After placing Mu Chenxue in the ice coffin, he could clearly feel that the speed at which Mu Chenxue's soul was collapsing had completely stopped. Without a doubt, this was definitely the work of the ice coffin. Whether it was the ice coffin or the mysterious crystal ice soul, they were both of the cold attribute, which was absolutely beneficial to freezing Mu Chenxue's soul. After doing all this, Zhuan turned to Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao and asked, "Father, Mother, have there been any other movements in the Eastern lands recently?" Long Xiaotian shook his head and said, "We have contacted the other Ryuka disciples in the Eastern lands, but there hasn't been any movements in the Eastern lands. Even the Dragon Spirit Realm and Divine Spirit Realm that you asked us to investigate didn't seem to have made any movements. Could it be that the people of the Ice and Fire family have left the Eastern lands and returned to the Central lands?" Zhuan frowned slightly. He didn't agree with this guess. He was very clear that the main purpose of the Ice and Fire family's young master's trip was the Ice and Fire sacred symbol. As long as the young master of the Ice and Fire family wasn't a fool, and then asked around in the Eastern lands, it was very likely that he would suspect him. However, there was no movement in the Eastern lands. This matter isn't urgent. Perhaps the Ice and Fire family is still in the Eastern lands, but we don't know about it. Let's wait for a while and see. Xiao Hei's voice suddenly sounded. Zhuan nodded in understanding and said, "Then let's wait and see. I just broke through and can consolidate my cultivation first." Over the next period of time, Zhuan regained control of the Azure Dragon Hall. In order to make it easier for him to gather information in the Eastern lands, Zhuan moved the Azure Dragon Hall to the Eastern lands. Of course, in order not to alert the enemy, Zhuan was very careful and hid the Azure Dragon Hall at the bottom of the Bitter Sea. Occasionally, he would send some Ryuka cultivators in disguise to enter the 9th Netherworld realm to gather information. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.